meeting has been provided to the public in accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meeting Act. That notice was published in the Jersey Journal City website. Copies provided in the record. The North Star Ledger also placed on the bulletin board in the lobby of City Hall. Written objections, if any, shall be made to the city clerk.
Please rise to salute the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Farina, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Mr. Fusco?
Present.
Mr. Doyle?
Here.
Fisher?
Here.
Giantino?
Here.
Mr. Quintero?
Present.
Mr. Ramos? Mr. Russo?
Present.
President Jabour?
Here. We're going to suspend the agenda to do a few proclamations that you'll find listed on page 2 of the agenda. I'm just going to make sure everyone's here. Does everyone want to come up when we go do this? Everyone want to go up? Sorry, if you want to come and see it, of course. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, we have everybody. We've got everybody. Okay. Wonderful. Well, so we spoke a bit, I think, at the last meeting about Black History Month, and I had some words about historic leader. Somebody came up and talked a little bit about Frederick Douglass. But I think it's just as important to recognize community leaders now, especially for how things are going in Hoboken and people who are making a difference in the lives of others. And I think it's very important for us as community leaders to recognize the things that are happening outside of this room and what leadership means for each of us as elected officials, to bring people from the community to recognize the amazing work that you're doing, and to elevate that, and to thank you and show appreciation. I was actually approached initially by Barbara Reyes, who is chair of the Housing Authority Board, and she came forward and had 2 fantastic suggestions for community leaders that she suggested that this council and our mayor recognize. So I'm not going to pretend to do justice to it, so I'm going to ask Barbara Reyes to please come forward to make these recognitions.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the City Council. I'd like to thank President Emily Jabour, Vice President Michael Russo. Vice President Michael Russo, who I initially reached out to concerning this acknowledgement, and for accepting them. There is so much I could say about these 2 amazing young men, born and raised in the Hoboken Housing Authority, and who unfortunately faced tragedy at an early age, continue to focus on their love of basketball and their community. Today, Marquise Hanbury is the founder of Hoboken Elite, a travel basketball team that he and his brother, amongst other amazing coaches, run for our children. Tyshawn continues to also play basketball on his own time. The fact that without question, they were both willing to help us this past summer at the Hoboken Housing Authority with our basketball league, and even won a championship for us, makes me, as well as the residents of the Housing Authority, very proud. Both of these men have become role models and mentors to the young men and females that they have encountered and coached. Marquise and Tyshawn are prime examples that despite your life challenges and environment, when you put your mind to something, you can achieve it. I am proud to have nominated such great, humble men to be honored tonight. Thank you, guys.
have these plaques for each of you. See? Come on. We'll go across this way. Thank you so much. Do either of you want to sign a shirt? Thank you so much. Congratulations. There's one more. Yes. So this young woman I first met during COVID, actually, I believe, was the first time. And we were down at the Housing Authority, and her entire family, actually, I mean, this really kind of goes for the whole family, frankly. We met at the Housing Authority during a time when people were stuck inside and needed supplies, whether it was food or if it was masks. And I'll forever remember just meeting you and your energy and your compassion. Jalinda is just a natural leader. And on top of that, she's a teacher, a pre-K teacher at that, which in my mind makes her a hero, because if you've ever tried to wrangle 15 4 or 5-year-olds, you know what a feat that is. Since that time, I just have known Jalinda to continue to push herself and to push people around her and inspire people around her to do more. So Jalinda took part not just in the efforts that were happening around COVID relief to help people at a time that was very dark, but from there, she went on to then establish an organization called Familyhood, which you haven't heard. If you have not heard of Familyhood, it is a community group that's meant to do outreach, to do programs that bring the entire community together, whether you live in the northwest corner of Hoboken, the southeast corner, the southwest, events like the Trunk or Treat, which has been successful 2 years in a row by Mama Johnson. And beyond that, then Jalinda thought about programming on a regular basis and thought there was a need to create a dance program, and started meeting in one of the community rooms with a group of very talented dancers who've performed at the Winter Wonderland event, another Familyhood event in partnership with the Hoboken Housing Authority. And I am constantly impressed and amazed by your never-ending energy to do all of these things after what I'm sure is always a long day teaching. Jalinda is just, to me, she is a true leader, and she continues to inspire all of us, I think, to do more and to do better. So I am very grateful, Jalinda, for your leadership in this community.
Now recite.
Okay.
I might get a line out. Yeah, you got one?
Okay.
About it. Back over there. No.
So just a little bit of housekeeping regarding the agenda. For those of you in the room, you should see this marked on your agendas, but for others who are not in the room, I just wanted to update a few items that are being carried. I'm going to give everybody a minute. Yeah, I got it. So items B538 and B539 are both carried for purposes of planning board review. Items CD1, CD5, CD6, CD7, CD8, PS1, and ordinance number 2 for first reading are all off of the agenda for tonight and being carried to the next meeting. With that, we are going ordinance number 2 for first reading. It should be marked on yours.
Is that what the strike-through stands for?
With that, we're actually going to start this evening's meeting with a presentation regarding Sinatra Drive redesign. So I'm going to turn it over to Director Sharp. Can you raise the microphone? Who's got it?
Good.
Who's got the button? Oh, you've got it? Okay. Oh, it's not? Okay. Somebody's got it. Okay. Thank you, Director Sharp.
Good.
Run with it.
All right.
Unless Rod wants me to do it.
Good evening, council members. Happy belated Valentine's Day. So we're going to give a brief presentation on the Sinatra Drive redesign project. But before we get started on that, I do just want to give a big thank you to everyone in the community who provided feedback over the last year on this project. That includes the 1,300 plus people who responded to our surveys. That includes the stakeholder groups, Fund for a Better Waterfront, Stevens, police and fire, the veterans community, Bike Hoboken, and others. Their feedback collectively has been critical to getting to where we are today, where I think we have a really good comprehensive final plan that I think the community is going to be really proud of. So with that said, we're actually going to focus primarily on the Union Dry Dock area today. We do have slides for the entire corridor, so if you want to go through them, let us know. We're happy to do that. But the reason we're going to do it like that is A, Union Dry Dock's kind of the star of the show tonight, and B, in December when we had our last public meeting, we revealed the 90% design plans, and nothing else has changed except for some proposed changes to the Union Dry Dock area since then. So we'll start there. We want to be respectful of your time. It's a big agenda tonight, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you. And to do the presentation, we have Adam Gibson from Kimley Horn, our design team. Adam?
All right, good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. So as Ryan mentioned, my name is Adam Gibson. I am a traffic engineer with Kimley Horn and Associates. I'm also a City of Hoboken resident. And I'm really excited to be here in front of you tonight because 9.5 years ago, I stood here being awarded the planning and visioning project for Sinatra Drive, where we started this planning process. Obviously, that got shelved for a little bit. We had some interim improvements since then. So really excited to be at this point with you, looking to do some construction out there and really improve the safety along Sinatra Drive. So just to orient people real quick, we're redesigning 0.7 miles of stretch of Sinatra Drive from 4th and River up to Sinatra and Hudson.
No.
We're also looking at a portion of 5th Street from River Terrace down to Sinatra Drive. And this project is really part of the city's ongoing efforts to upgrade the waterfront, as well as to implement their Complete Streets and Vision Zero action plan. So Ryan mentioned the robust stakeholder engagement that we had over the past year. And what I wanted to do now was just to kind of summarize everything that we heard from all of the residents and the stakeholders throughout the project. These are the project highlights that really guided us through our initial concept development to our 90% plans that we submitted in February. And so to kind of summarize those, many of these highlights focused on improved safety for all modes of transportation, not just peds and bikes, but also vehicles. Accessibility, both in terms of the ability of different riders or levels of ridership for people who are going to use the bike path, as well as for the ADA community being able to access certain parts of the waterfront that are currently inaccessible today. And then finally, upgraded streetscape improvements along the entire corridor. So as Ryan mentioned, we're focusing today on the Union Dry Dock portion, and the concept that you see on the screen now is from our 90% plans that we submitted back in December, where we had a lane of traffic in each direction, we had a protected bike path, and then we had a widened sidewalk along Union Dry Dock, where today there are 3 access points into Union Dry Dock. There's not an ADA accessible route there except for that temporary multi-use path that is there. The sidewalks that are there today don't have curb ramps at some of the driveways. So they're not conducive to pushing strollers, and they're not conducive to rolling in a wheelchair. This area, as part of this plan, also did not have any parking, and it did not have any landscaping. Fast forward to really 2 days prior to the time we submitted our 90% plans, when the city came into agreement for Union Dry Dock. We were tasked with developing a concept that could reinstitute parking, still have the bike path, also have a wider sidewalk along the Union Dry Dock frontage, as well as to provide some area that would allow us to have the same type of landscaping and streetscape treatment that we're proposing along the southern end of this portion of Sinatra Drive, to be able to carry that through to the north end. And so with this proposed condition that we have here, when you compare it to the 90% plan that had 0 parking spaces, we're now adding back in 66 parking spaces along this activity, what will become an activity center along Sinatra Drive. So as the Union Dry Dock parcel is redeveloped, that's going to become an activity center that's going to draw people to there, which means you're going to need to have a place to park. And so being able to extend into the Union Dry Dock allows us to have that space to be able to put parking back on both sides of the street. So, 8 years ago, we had parking on both sides of the street. We implemented the multi-use path that is there, and so it took away parking on the east side. Well, now with this additional space within Union Dry Dock, we're able to add back parking to both sides of the street, as well as still have the protected bike path and the wider sidewalk. This also, again, allows us to have a double row of trees, one in the median buffer between the parking lane and the bike lane, and then the other along the what will be the newly constructed sidewalk along Union Dry Dock. That sidewalk is proposed to be 8 feet, but does not prohibit us or prohibit the city as part of the Union Dry Dock redevelopment project to widen that sidewalk in the future if it's deemed necessary. This is a rendering, a comparison slide of what it looks like in the existing condition on the left-hand side, which is looking south towards Castle Point. The right-hand side is the proposed rendering that we put together of what the corridor is expected to look like once everything is finished. We did take a little bit of artistic liberty in terms of photoshopping out the fence and the buildings that are there on Union Dry Dock now. If you look really closely, it probably looks very similar to Maxwell Park. Just being able to take a nice image of what the city looks like and what a nice open area looks like. So we did put that in there. That is certainly not necessarily what that's going to look like in the future. In terms of next steps, the plan right now is to have plans or construction plans finished in March, roll right into the review and approval and permitting process by DOT, with the idea of being under construction by the end of this year and being hopefully finished with construction by the end of 2024. And with that, we'll open it up to any questions you might have.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And before we get into any questions, can you go back to that last slide for a minute, please? One of the reasons, we actually have 3 resolutions on the agenda tonight that are tied to this project. One is a resolution of support for the final design, and that's really important because as we get into NJDOT permitting, it's a federal aid project now because we have that $1.8 million grant, and so we have to follow more rigorous federal procurement guidelines, and we need to move forward with confidence that the council supports this project. Because we don't want to have to come out of that process and make major revisions to the plans once we get into NJDOT permitting and review, right? We also have a resolution that will adopt the federal procurement guidelines for the project. That's a requirement as well from the Federal Department of Transportation. And then a third resolution that will amend Kimley Horn's contract so that they can add some scope that will be required to complete the project through the construction phase. So with that, any questions? Councilwoman?
I just want to thank you. It's beautiful. It's really outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. I got a lot of feedback from folks around 1000 Hudson about their concern about parking, and I think that this new concept does a nice job. Does a really nice job with respect to enhancing parking, because there was a clear fear that folks rely on that area for parking and that they were going to be losing parking, and this is actually a net positive influx of additional spots while also having a beautiful space. So thank you to Kimley Horn, and thanks for listening to the folks in the public meeting and the feedback that I shared with you. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to reiterate the importance of that public feedback. we did take it very much to heart. We got a little bit fortunate that we received a $1.8 million grant and acquired Union Dry Dock, right? So that was very timely. In terms of the permitting timeline we have, we already had to apply for an extension because we have grant deadlines for when we have to spend the funds. So things were very close to not lining up. But we had a little bit of good fortune and some great feedback, and we put the two together, and this is what we have today. So part of that scope that Kimley Horn needs to complete the project includes actually redesigning the Union Dry Dock area. That's a concept that you saw today. So factor that in if you have any questions about that resolution later on.
Council President, this is not a comment on that. I forgot Stephen because I was so happy. Stevens did ask on 5th Street where their loading zone, not their loading zone, their loading dock is into McLean, right across from the batting cage. They had concerns that stanchions, I know that's like really in the weeds, but stanchions will be put there and they would not be able to get their trucks in and out.
Stevens has been a great stakeholder. They've actually been part of our biweekly meetings for a year now, right? And that did come up at one point. We assured them that we'll work with them on that.
Awesome.
It won't be an issue.
Thank you.
Any questions from council members? Any questions from members of the public? Patricia Waiters?
Excuse me, hearing on an ordinance amending
We're
chapter.
not, nope. We're just going to do questions on the presentation, Jimmy. Hang on one second.
I want to thank Ms. Garcia. I walked over to her, that's what I asked her. I was at that meeting, at the public meeting, and I was a little concerned that our January date was expired, but she just informed me she asked for an extension, and it was granted. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
I just want a clarification. From the point of view of what we've seen in that drawing, it looks like you moved the fence like 10 feet over or something like that. How is that extra space being incorporated? And is that in the plan that we have, the site plan, or is the site plan reflect the current disposition? Or is this the what you're moving from here to here? This is what.
Just, we have to use the microphone so that folks at home can hear you. So, Mr. Verthley, would you mind just allowing Director Sharp to use the microphone to respond?
Oh, sure.
Sorry, so everyone can hear him. Thank you.
So to answer your first question, we are moving the fence line where Union Dry Dock currently is, that black fence, about 25 feet east. And then to answer your second question, you have a document there that appears to show the leasing area for the New York Waterway lease. So it's kind of like two different things.
Okay, but I mean, given that they're both tied and.
Mr. Verthley, if you could use the microphone. Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
it's otherwise hard to
Given
hear.
that they're both tied, I just wanted to sort of, that I wanted to see what the impact was, given what we see in the site plan. But essentially, and that was my question number one. Question number two: how many parking spaces are there currently, and that are being transferred into 64?
Yeah, so throughout the entire project, or along this stretch, we have 52 parking spaces that are there today. And then we're going to have 66 that would be there in the future. With the 90% plan that we presented, there were 0 parking spaces there. And so with this new plan, we would have 66 spaces that we're adding back based on that 90% design.
And all the parking spaces, all the Union Dry Dock area would be?
Yeah, it's
Both sides.
roughly, there's 52 spaces that go from Sinatra Drive north roughly to the skate park. And there's about 4 spaces to 8 spaces within that area that's not necessarily in front of the dry dock. So you would be talking about 44 spaces that would be directly in front of Union Dry Dock. And so you would be adding another 22 spaces on top of that, but on both sides of the street combined, instead of just on the bluff side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Andraka?
Mayor Andraka, 159 9th Street. I have a couple of questions. You said that you're moving the fence 25 feet east, correct? So that means you're taking up some of the existing Union Dry Dock real estate. And you're doing that to allow for the road, since you're eating up roadway for the median, correct? Is that why you're moving it 25 feet to the east?
Yeah.
Is that why
Correct.
you're moving it 25
No,
feet to the
Ryan,
east?
Director
Do you want
Sharp
Director
needs
Sharp?
to-
Yeah, he just needs to use the microphone.
Yeah. So there's a combination of things that are being added. It's not just the parking. The previous, Adam, can you go back one slide? Yes, right there. So you can see that there's no parking on either side of the street, and the buffer zone, that thin little strip just above the green bikeway, is only about 2 feet wide. So that's going to be expanded to be, 6 or 7 feet wide?
Correct.
And that allows for planting a row of trees there, so that you can now plant a row of trees on the curb line, where the sidewalk is, where the wider sidewalk is, and then you'd also have a second row of trees in the bikeway buffer. So it gives you that double row of trees that we're trying to do throughout the corridor as much as possible to kind of match the south waterfront look.
25 feet is quite substantial to move it, I think. You're double banking trees, is that what you're saying within that period, within that space? 25 feet is a lot. Think about it. That's a lot of space. Wouldn't you agree? Is that for the double banking of the trees?
Yeah, but that might make sense, yeah.
Moving the mic up and down is fine.
Two-way bike lane that's 9 feet wide each way.
Right. So think of it like it's kind of front loading some improvements that would have probably been implemented as part of the Union Dry Dock construction, right? So instead of waiting, a few years for that to happen, this is an opportunity to provide some of these benefits now, right? The streetscape improvements, reintroducing parking. So yes, it's 25 feet into Union Dry Dock, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it's like 6% of the entire park area. So it's pretty minimal in terms of the actual area that's being utilized here. And I think that the overall benefit of the additional things that we're getting earlier, I think kind of outweighs getting that extra 25 feet into the park.
And who is choosing the type of tree that goes there?
So we worked very closely with the Shade Tree Commission. They ultimately have to approve the final landscape plan. We've also been working a lot with stakeholder groups. Fund for Better Waterfront's been a great partner in that regard. But ultimately the Shade Tree Commission will have final say.
Okay, keep in mind the lanternflies that are never going away. I know Mr. Phil Cohen doesn't like me to talk about lanternflies, but sorry. It came to my attention you didn't like it. I would like to also ask, is this totally funded by a grant? I doubt.
It's about 50% funded. So we have about $3 million in total grant funding. And we expect the project to cost in the neighborhood of $6 million.
And who foots the other 50%?
We have capital funding that was adopted by City Council back in October of last year for several street improvement projects. Sinatra Drive was one of them.
Okay, since I was here for the debacle of Washington Street that was overrun by several millions of dollars, which I documented so clearly, what are you going to do about the overruns? Don't tell me there won't be, because there will be.
We will do the best we can to make sure there are not any overruns. We have a great construction management team, and this is a federal aid project. So Washington Street was not a federal aid project. There are very, very rigorous procurement guidelines and construction administration guidelines and requirements, right? So full-time inspection is required, and we're pretty confident that things are going to go better than Washington Street, but we can only do the best we can.
And what was the length that you're talking about for this redoing the street? Between what streets?
It's
Is it the
0.7
entire
miles
one?
between 4th Street and Hudson Street.
Okay. I have been on that street when it has flooded because of the water that comes up over the river during certain storms. Has that been taken into account? Because you have planters there and I don't know what else, but that can be an issue, and I wanted to know, are you prepared or aware of those scenarios?
You want to take that one?
I personally can't verify that it has flooded during any of those storm events. I haven't personally seen it, but we do have areas.
Well, I am telling you the truth because I've been on the road on a car, and I was kind of worried that the car was going to die because the altimeters.
Understand. But as part of the project, there along Castle Point where you have those raised planters that are there today, those raised planters are going to go away, and so we'll have a vegetated strip that's there. Overall, we're reducing the amount of impervious area that is there. We're not going to be able to raise the street and raise the Hudson River waterfront walkways, so we'll have to do the best we can with the additional pervious area that we're implementing into the project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Yep, Councilwoman Fisher.
just a quick question. Director, by the way, I love it, and as we talked earlier, so it's a beautiful design, and I'm really happy that we've added parking back as well. About how wide, it says widening the ADA compliant sidewalk, about how wide do you think, or will it be versus like what it is right now?
It's roughly doubling the width, so
Okay.
it's going to be about 8 feet
Okay,
on average.
okay. And it won't have the cracks and, and things in the middle of it.
Newly poured concrete. The utility poles and the fire hydrants that are there today as impediments, those will actually be within the buffer area that
Okay.
is away from that sidewalk.
Oh, great.
So that you'll just have the street trees that are there. So you'll have 8 feet of width in between those street trees, and then the tree pits that we're putting in there will be.
Right. That was one of the design
That's
challenges
actually-
that kind of was uniquely solved for. What do we do with the utility poles out there now? They're in the middle of the sidewalk. So you kind of get a hidden benefit there by adding the parking back in and shifting everything over just right.
Yeah.
You can hide the utility poles in the buffer zone. So
Awesome, great, thank you.
Mr. Hine? Just as a reminder, this is for questions primarily, if possible. This is primarily for questions. If you wanted to make comments on the project, we could do that during public portion. Do you have specifically questions? Do you have questions?
Oh, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to make a comment. Should I wait for the resolution to come up?
Yeah.
That would be preferable if you don't mind. I just wanted to make sure if people have questions. Yes. If you could just state your name for the record.
I am I'm one of the 1,000 Hudson Street residents that Councilman Cohen referred to, and I thank you for the consideration of parking. I think it's really important. I have one question because I'm still kind of confused. Overall, what is the net change in parking between the 4th Street and the Hudson Street?
She asked for the net change in parking. The net change in parking.
Yeah, so overall, through the entire corridor, there are existing 208 parking spaces. There will be
174.
We're going to lose a total of 40 from that.
Okay.
So in total, across the entire corridor, we'll lose a total of 40 parking
Net
spaces.
loss.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And one other quick.
sorry, I just wanted to add one point there.
Oh, you're going to add it.
Yeah, so almost all of those 40 are going to be kind of near the point area, which is kind of the furthest point away from where residential uses are, and then the parks and fields further downstream. So that was one of the project goals, was to try to maintain or maximize parking at the north end, close to where people live, or activity nodes, right, and the south end as well. So.
And then I don't know where the Union Dry Dock design stands, but is it fair to assume that what's being done in that 25 feet is not going to have to be redone 5 years from now when we get the Union Dry Dock property?
Yeah.
No, that's not a reasonable assumption.
We're not redoing that.
Oh, okay.
No.
That's what we're trying to achieve here.
Okay.
Right.
Part of the
So that's one of the benefits of kind of front loading this work now. So we don't have to worry about coming back and redoing it in X number of years, right? So that's the goal.
Okay.
Now, granted, there are other things that could come out of the design that we don't anticipate that could add on features to what we're doing here. So that could be a benefit as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Manny Rivera-Soler?
The name, be like mayor.
Thank you, Council President. I just have a few notes or clarifications here. I was at that meeting that they had here, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and I was also at the Shade Tree Commission meeting when they were discussing these trees as well as other trees. And the reason I stand today to speak on it is because there was a Shade Tree Commission meeting this week, and the topic was going to be in regards to the trees that are going to be planted in this area, but they still haven't gotten the complete schematics of it because they are trying to adjoin it to the other project with the Union Dry Dock. Is that correct?
Well, so we just don't have a final set of plans yet, engineered plans yet, so we didn't want to go in front of the Shade Tree Commission and present something that hadn't ultimately been approved as part of the city council, so we didn't want to go back twice to the Shade Tree Commission. So the idea is to hopefully be on the March Shade Tree Commission meeting to represent the plans along Union Dry Dock.
Yeah, that's what I was. I understood in the Shade Tree Commission because there was an issue. They would prefer. I'm not their spokesman, by the way, but they would prefer to know as soon as possible, or the sooner the better, because they would have interest in the actual trees that will be planted there, due to the fact that a other member of the public mentioned the lanternflies, because they know the possibilities of trees that would prevent that. And I remember last meeting it was the London Pine or London Lane. I don't forgot the name of it. Pine, right? Plane. And I always forget. So that was my question there, or my comment on that. I don't want to opine on it too much because it's of course in development. If you can please, before I ask the next question, I want this one. Just to clarify for members of the audience that perhaps weren't at the meeting, there are 48 parking spaces that are going to be removed or lost in this deal, but the plans were or are that you are going to somehow down the line find ways to add more somewhere where the residential and where people have more access or more need to the parking, because again, that was a concern and it's a concern here today. So am I correct in assuming that as well, right?
Could you ask that again? I'm sorry, I guess I didn't understand.
You're losing 48 in this round, but you will perhaps bring more back in another project or along that same route.
So I think it's 40 total, right? That are, yeah, I think it's 40 total throughout the project area that will be lost to this project. And then, if there are other opportunities to add parking back in the area, we always do our best to try to find those opportunities. We don't have anything lined up at this moment, but no, I don't think so. No.
Anything else, sir?
No. Any other questions?
Yes, I have other questions. I just wanted to make sure that we got all the information. No, that was what I heard in the meeting and what I took away from. I just wanted to make sure that it's said here. Members of the public that weren't there can hear it, because this is the opportunity if anybody else would like to ask any other questions. Then my main concern here would be this one I did not understand well. Again, if you can help members of the public, myself, and the Hoboken residents in general, the ADA compliance that you said you're not going to be ADA compliant in certain areas, or you are going to be ADA compliant? Are going to be ADA. Currently not.
Correct.
This creates improvements that ensure ADA compliance through things such as the ramp areas. Currently, there are not.
That's what I heard misunderstood. Thank you very much, C. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, thank you so much for the presentation. Oh, is there? I'm sorry, right behind ahead. Sorry, come on up. If you stand here.
Diane Sobin, my questions. One is, and it's a great design. You're removing the current dark fence that now hides the Union Dry Dock. As you put up your trees, and then what will be the barrier between those trees and the, let's say, commercial operations of Union Dry Dock? And do we have any way to dictate what that design is to separate the beauty that we're putting up and the
Right.
non-beauty that is going to be there?
That's a great question. So there will be a new fence or new fence line that will be along the perimeter of that 25-foot stretch that will separate, whatever operations happening on the other side, the sea side.
And how high will it be?
I don't know the answer to that.
We were speaking with New York Waterway this afternoon, where they agreed they would be the ones in charge of putting up the fence, not the city, but that part of the height and exactly where it's going to go is something that we'll work out with once they install it.
Okay, and would we approve the design of that fence so there would be an aesthetically pleasing fence?
We can request it, and we will have that conversation once we get to that point. But I don't think anyone wants to see another black covered fence,
Exactly.
I understand.
Thank you. And also, just to follow a quick one on the trees, up in Maxwell Park, the trees uprooted during a windstorm. So again, I'd just like to register that we should have trees that will stay intact during storms.
That's the goal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now I think we have all questions from the public. Thank you much, Director Sharp. Appreciate the presentation. Mr. Farina, ordinances for second reading.
Hearing on an ordinance amending Chapter 190, Article 4, entitled Through Streets, Stop and Yield Intersection to designate multi-way stop control at 8 intersections. We have
I think Manuel Rivera Soler, I think you're signed up to speak on this.
Manuel
B53
Rivera Soler.
533.
There's an
Once again, thank you, Council President Manuel Rivera Soler, 529 Park Avenue. In this ordinance, I know that was some stuff said last meeting. I just want to, because I am curious as to know, when you did the study, or when the study was done for the multi-way stop control, what were the factors in that study? Was there any public interest or complaint on certain streets? And as I asked for the streets, would you be able to let members of the audience know at some point which are the streets that are going to be now converted to this four-way stop? Because as a person who walks around the streets of Hoboken, it's very difficult, even if you have a four-way stop, for any of those cars to sometimes stop. Sometimes it becomes almost an accident, but obviously that's what we're trying to prevent in this ordinance. But if you could just give us a little bit more details on what are the streets that are going to be changed, how is that sign going to be with the stop sign with the red flare that goes all the way to the bottom, so it could bring more attention to the individual stops? You know, what's the design of the stop sign or the stop, whatever it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a stop sign or a stop light. I doubt it. But if you can give a little color on that, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no more members of the public signed up to speak. Motion to close public comment.
Second.
All in favor? So just to give a quick summary, this is adding a stop sign at the following intersections: Monroe and 7th, Monroe and 8th, Clinton and 8th, Clinton and 9th, Jefferson and 1st, Willow and 1st, Bloomfield and 1st, and Bloomfield and Newark. And this is the result of engineering studies that were done to determine traffic flow patterns, and it was done in coordination in particular with the county. We appreciate that the county worked with us for that First Street corridor in particular. Council members?
Brad well was
Yes.
taken into account. There was that wanted to see study. Unfortunately, we approved at this time. Those, I think it was 5 others, I believe, 5 other stop intersections that four other intersections that we wanted to include as multi-stops, but they were rejected at this time. Hopefully down the road, they'll be approved.
And just to add to one of the questions that we discussed in the Transportation Subcommittee, Councilman, the chair of that, is extended on times. It's like summer months, for example. So if there's an area in particular around a school, this would capture the regular traffic patterns that would be in place when school is in session. They weren't done at a time of year when it wouldn't necessarily replicate your regular traffic patterns.
Correct.
Council members? Councilman Cohen?
Quickly, yeah, this is also a may always stop sign. So if traffic are coming through the intersections, they'll get the stop sign. Can't listen.
Mr. Farina?
Mr. Cohen? Fusco? Mr. Dorf? Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Jean Tino?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
President Jabour?
Yes.
Hearing on an ordinance of the City of Hoboken, County of Hudson, State of New Jersey, authorizing a lease agreement with Port Imperial Marina Facilities, LLC, as tenant for portion of real property known as Block 259, Lot 1 on the official tax map of the city. Paul Presenzano, first speaker.
I passed out to Councilman Ramos just so there's some misinformation that this is data that I collected so that you can all see it. I only give you a couple, so if you can share amongst yourselves. This vote today probably passes 5-4 or 6-3, and that's how it works with the majority in the council. But I ask you guys to have an open mind and just listen to me for a few minutes on what I have to say. New York Waterway is going to be leasing public land. They're going to be refueling and maintaining 20 ferries. And from the 2,600 word nixle from the City Hall, it didn't brush aside some of the facts and it left a lot of remaining questions. So why are we betting on that our sister city will play ball and allow the waterfront to be the home for New York Waterway? Do we do the research on the cost of boat slips? Who's going to ensure that the lease details are going to be enforced? And most of all, how much would it cost to remove New York Waterway if they refuse to vacate Union Dry Dock? And after reading more on New York Waterway, there has to be more to the story here. This is too sweet of a deal. There's something we don't know. Now, let's get back to the basics of the lease, the amount of rent. I called the shipyard, the piers there, which many of us see the boats out there, and I called Liberty Landing in Jersey City, and I got their boat slip rates. Now, they cater to, as you can see on the handout I gave you, they cater to recreational, but Jersey City does have commercial in there. So it would give us an idea of the supply-demand forces that exist in the area to give us a better idea on what it would cost to, for a lease or a boat slip. So a ferry boat is roughly 65 feet, and it can go up to 110 depending on how many passengers you have. But for this exercise, I use 65 feet in my calculations. So the way they calculate the cost for a boat slip is you take the length of the boat, multiply it times the fee that they charge you, and that's what you pay. Now, majority of the times they offer a yearly price. So that's based what I used on a lot of this. So if you look at the Jersey City lease, it was $425 a foot. So I multiplied that by 65, and I multiplied that times 20 because we're going to have 20 ferries there, and I got $555K. If I go over to the shipyard, which is cheaper, and I don't know how, but they probably couldn't accommodate a ferries in there, it's $230 for a yearly rate, times 65, times 20 is about $299, $300K. If I back out the $55K yearly lease that New York Waterway is getting in this proposal, it backs out to $42 a foot. So nowhere near market rates. And let me put in context as well, a 2-bedroom in the shipyard goes for about $48K a year, and that's for 2 people. This is for 20 boats on the water. And if we got close to market rates, we could actually help defer some of the costs of the design plan that you guys are going to vote on later that's about $1.1 million. So it would be a smart thing for taxpayers here. But this leaves a lot more questions. Why such a sweetheart deal? Why is the Hoboken taxpayer subsidizing New York Waterway? Should the Hoboken commuter not get a reduced fare for this really aggressive lease? And the mayor said in his nixle that the primary objective is not to generate revenue from a short-term lease. Well, what's the difference between a short-term and a long-term lease? It's a lease. It's about making money. So in either case, you should be getting market rates. And as elected officials, your number one duty is to protect the taxpayer. And this is a concerning trend in many of the city negotiations that have happened over the past 6 months. Basic business seems to be replaced with a rush for a headline. But I'm not here to complain. I'm here to offer some solutions, some suggestions, and some points. We are Hoboken. It's our land. The city needs to flex and let New York Waterway, you can't push us around. Let them know. We should have done our homework on the boat slips to understand fair market value because that would have helped us. We should have put the taxpayers' concerns ahead of New York Waterway. But the most part here is what are we going to do to ensure that the headlines, that if they don't leave after 5 years? But one last point. I do want to remind the crowd here. November 13th, 2018, Mayor Bala at a press conference, which some of you were there, made this quote: New York Waterway is not going to locate maintenance operations or refueling facilities at Union Dry Dock. It will not happen during this administration over my dead body. Well, look where we are today. We're here trying to negotiate a lease. So maybe you guys can vote no today, bring us back to the table, and maybe make him good on his promise. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's up next?
Ruth McMorrow.
Good evening. My name is Ruth Marr. I live 1025 Maxwell Lane, and I've lived in Hoboken since 1985. I'm here tonight to speak out in opposition to the proposed lease agreement between... Closer? Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm here tonight to speak out in opposition to the proposed lease agreement between the city and New York Waterway. Well, I recognize that the city is in the very unfortunate position of having to negotiate with New York Waterway to get control of the Union Dry Dock property. The terms and conditions of this lease are egregious, wholly in favor of New York Waterway, and highly detrimental to the city and its residents. First, the scope of operations allows for ferry maintenance facility, which will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no restrictions for noise. Nothing else in the city has those types of provisions. It's in an area directly adjacent to residential and recreation areas, which are key to citizens. In addition, there will be parking for up to 20 ferry boats and refueling operations. After decades of hard work by the city to develop and clean up our waterfront, essentially this is reindustrializing a key portion and a central portion of that waterfront. For how long? Well, the stated term of the lease is 3 years, but New York Waterway can extend for 2 years pretty much at their discretion. The stated rent levels do nothing to incentivize New York Waterway to leave at the end of either the initial term or the extension. In fact, the proposed rent levels entice New York Waterway to stay here in Hoboken and use that facility. Even after 5 years, the city would have to initiate eviction proceedings, to get New York Waterway to leave. And even during that period, they would only have to pay $25,000 a month, which, given the economics previously presented, is ridiculous. In addition, the terms of the lease do not start, the term of the lease doesn't start until New York Waterway has gotten all of its permits and have them in place. So we're not talking about 5 years starting today. It could be a year from now, 2 years from now. Again, currently delaying that park that everybody wants. Effectively, the city is taking the full-time risk of getting those permits in place. Shouldn't New York Waterway bear that risk, not us? Not only do the proposed rent levels incentivize New York Waterway to stay for at least 3 years, the lease also exempts the property from any property taxes. My 1,400 square foot condo pays approximately $20,000 a year in property taxes. I can't even believe, if we did the math, what would be the property taxes that should be accruing on the value of that property. Lastly, the lease includes a tenant indemnification, read New York Waterway, intended to protect the city. Is that indemnification sufficient to cover potential liabilities regarding the property? Do we even have a baseline study of what's the condition of the property now once we turn it over to them? Does the party leasing the property have the financial strength to support that indemnification? There's potential environmental liabilities. They're lowering the bulkhead. They'll be refueling there. Those are critical issues which could leave the city open to significant risk. I urge the City Council to table this lease agreement and ask Mayor Bala and his administration to reopen negotiations with the goal of a more balanced and acceptable lease agreement, shorter term with incentives to leave, appropriate constraints on hour of operations and compliance with noise regulations, and environmental protections with broad indemnity from a financially sound party. Thank you.
Manuel Rivera Sola.
Again, good evening, Council President Manuel Rivera Soler, but you could perhaps call me Nostradamus because I saw the meeting last 2 weeks ago, and I predicted that we were going to be sitting till midnight that meeting, and we did. We passed it. So, but don't quote me at anything else. But I did want to speak on this one, B43. No, B543.
4-3.
This is
5-3-4.
the reason why people feel that they are not being heard and that their elected political officials tend to just stand or sit here in your case and just hear us, but you don't take action in what any other members of the public are asking you. For sure, you also have other constituents that perhaps are not here and that favor certain things. Perhaps they don't come. But the people who are here, who come meeting after meeting and ask for your attention and ask for your respect on certain things, I think that they should get it. If a few members of the public are asking you to table something or maybe to not vote for something, maybe you should consider it. And if not, give them the actual reason why you are voting in favor of said ordinance. Is it true that it's better to make $4,500+ or not? Is that a solution for a city that needs money because it needs money to pay all of the bills and all of the bonds that are even in this agenda? Is that fair for the residents and taxpayers of Hoboken? I do not think so, but it's a question. Also, we all know that once a person has the opportunity or an entity to stay for 5 years instead of 3, if they can stay 3, they'll stay to 3, but if they have the option for the 5, they'll stay for the 5. Unless you have it in writing that you can tell members of the public, this is written in stone, this was the best deal we can make in this moment. But this has been, as a member of the public said, 2018, even before that, this has been rumbling, this has been going around the city, and that's the perception. Again, my concern here is the perception that the people have of this august council. You cannot continue to tell the people one thing and act another way because they are your constituents. They will not forget the emotions. Again, it's not a threat. It's just a piece of advice. Just let the people know exactly what's happening, as well as the administration. They should tell the people. They should make a press conference. They should not have a statement where he can't be asked a question. He should ask questions to the people. We should be able to confront the people when they have this concern. I believe that whatever you do here tonight, I'm just speaking because I sort of know what's the outcome of this vote because I've looked at meetings and after meetings after meetings. It's been almost a year and a half. The vote never changes. Maybe it pitters one extra or one less, but it's always going to pass in favor of what the political machine wants. And in this case, that's what's happening here. And again, it's not putting any of you down personally because it's not you personally. It's the actions you're taking on certain things. And again, I would hope that someday we could all come together at least in one thing in this council and say, okay, we're going to agree to do something and stick to it. Not change, not hide, because transparency is always, always important. And Madam President, I just don't know if it's us that we don't understand, if you're not understanding us, but we need more clarity, more transparency in all of these dealings because this is not the only one. There are a lot of big things coming down the pike. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Norrell Thurlow.
It automatically lowered seeing me coming. That's funny. Wow. Hi, I'm Noelle. Don't touch the mic. Oh. It's okay. Sorry, I touched it. Too late. Most of you have seen me, met me before during this process. I would like to thank the mayor and the council members and everyone that worked to get us to this position where the city is poised to have Union Dry Dock. I know it was a lot of work, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate that the comments I gave, I wasn't able to appear the last time. I gave suggestions for things that needed to be added to the lease, and they were added, and I appreciate that also. So thank you so much. However, I'm here to urge you not to sign it yet, and I'll give you the reasons why. First, here's my expertise. I'm a kayak guide, and I've been in the industry for over 30 years. I was the vice president of programs and safety for Outward Bound in the busy Boston Harbor. I was also the outdoor programs manager for REI in the New York Tri-State. I have a lot of experience and expertise in these waters, bringing kayakers, paddleboarders, and other human-powered boaters out there. I also run Resilience Paddle Sports. We're different than Hoboken Cove Boathouse. We provide lessons and tours to adults, and we provide environmental education and summer camp paddling and after camp paddling for youth. Last year, we served 1,500 adults and 700 youth. 700 youth we had on the water last year. That's a lot of people who are at risk of New York Waterway in their location, in the location that they may be using. I'm going to tell you a story first. In 2013, we're crossing the river. We're talking about New York now. There was an RFP, Hudson River Parks Trust, and as a result, there was a shuffling of different entities at different piers. The Manhattan Kayak Company ended up moving from Pier 66 to Pier 84, adjacent to New York Waterway. Within 3 years, there was an accident in which a group of kayakers was run over by New York Waterway Ferry Company. Within 3 years. This is the same amount of time as the lease that you're talking about. Okay, so there was certainly an investigation. Yes, there was. And the findings, you can read them online, but the main reason was because, 2 reasons: a lack of communication between the kayak and ferry company, and the sun glare that prevented the ferry captain from seeing the kayakers. We can't change the sun glare, but you can work on the communication between kayak and ferry companies. My organization, we already used all the different things, all the different forms of communication that were suggested in the investigation. We already used them and we continue to use them. New York Waterway was asked or was told that they had to always have a mate or someone who was on watch looking out for people in the event of the sun glare again, and they were supposed to monitor a certain channel on the VHF radio, channel 13. That was the outcome. They were asked to do that. In November, just this past year, my group had a near miss with New York Waterway at the Lackawanna terminal. We did everything we were supposed to do. We radioed it in on channel 13. We wore brightly colored clothing. We had brightly colored kayaks. We held our position. We stayed out of the way. And still, we ended up within touching distance of the bow of the vessel. The New York Waterway ferry, that particular ferry, didn't sound the horn when they backed out. They didn't monitor the radio. They didn't have a lookout, and they nearly ran us over. So I contacted the Harbor Operations Committee, which, if you don't know them, they're a portion of the Waterfront Alliance. And that's their role. You know, they help communication between different entities, different stakeholders in the water. They contacted the safety director of New York Waterway, and he did an internal investigation and found those things to be true that I just said. They weren't in compliance. This is just this November, 6 years after that incident where the kayakers were run over. And what he said he did, the safety director said, he issued a stern directive. Okay, a stern directive. They almost ran us over. People would have died, potentially. They would have been injured. And so My reading of the lease in its current form, my opinion is it's not strong enough in the language. Yes, thank you so much for including the suggestions that I put in there about having New York Waterway follow the law, the marine law about these communication tools. However, there's no consequences. There's this, it says if they do something against the lease after, they have to correct it within 30 days.
Noel, if you could just
That's
wrap up your comments, just because I know a number of people are signed up to speak.
Okay, thank you. I urge you to not sign it until you include some kind of memorandum of understanding or some kind of plan for oversight and clear consequences for their actions. If you don't, you're going to have an accident. It's very clear there's going to be an accident. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ron Hine. Ron Hine.
We got a copy of this lease 2 weeks ago at the last council meeting, and that was the first time that we had a chance to really scrutinize what was in the lease. And of course, this is something that we have anticipated for many years. We understood that a condition of the city acquiring this property is that there would be a temporary lease with New York Waterway. We understood that. But when we saw the terms of this lease, we were rather taken back. First, let me suggest that something as important as this, and something that has been years and years in the works and has been fought over, we have people in that neighborhood, the kayaking groups, the whole community came together to prevent New York Waterway from locating there with their ferry maintenance and refueling operation. And when we looked at this lease, we saw that's what we're getting potentially for the next 5 years. So this doesn't qualify as a short-term lease. This is not what we were told initially. We were told initially that it would be, what, a year, maybe? Now we're faced with them being there for a 5-year period. We were also told they wouldn't be able to refuel there. Well, it turns out now they will be. So anyway, we've been following the situation in Weehawken, and it is clear that people there don't want the ferry to be rebuilt at that location either. And it appears that Mayor Turner has backed down from whatever prior promises he had made. Potentially, we're faced with the situation that they may not have a location. They may never get approvals in Weehawken. They may never be able to rebuild their facility there. And so let's assume they've been here for 4 or 5 years. What happens then? They don't have any place to go. What happens then? We have a new governor. We have a I don't know what the elected official situation in Hoboken will be, but a lot of things will change, and we could be faced with the same threat all over again. So I wanted to address a couple other issues, and I wanted to make a suggestion as to what I think might be a good solution. But first, I read the FAQs, and I think there was a number of things that were not accurate, and I just want to show to you what the site looks like. forgive my artwork, but I'm trying to make it clear that New York Waterway will have control of 5.6 acres of a 8.2 acre site. So that's what you see in red. That's all the area that New York Waterway will have control of. So they'll have control of all the piers. They'll have control of almost all of the land at the water's edge. It's 63% of the site. So there's at the very north end, that's the yellow. You have a water area that really, it's not part of the lease. It's not really, the city can't build a park over the water there. So what the city is left, and then of course the dark green is what you saw before. It's the 25-foot strip that'll be added to the Sinatra Drive project, which is a good thing. We support that. So the city is promising that we'll start building the park. You're going to have a contract before you tonight. You're going to be able to hire someone to design the park. So we'll be getting a park soon. Well, I don't quite believe that. The city, the light green part here, that's less than an acre. I don't know how much sense it makes to start building a park on less than an acre. So what my other work of art here is the Hoboken terminal. And so the blue, of course, is the water area. This is where the ferries used to leave from at the Hoboken terminal. And in 2009, the DEP gave a waterfront permit to New Jersey Transit to do everything there. The refueling, the storage, the repairs, everything was to be done there. Well, it never happened. But this is, what you're seeing here is, this is New Jersey Transit, Hoboken Ferry Maintenance Facility. New Jersey Transit owns 80 acres at this location.
Mr. Hine, if you could just wrap up your comments.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So what I'm proposing is take the storage of the ferries and move them to the Hoboken terminal or somewhere else. But that would probably solve 90% of the problem. If you just remove that part of it and put it at a different location. Thank you very much.
Heather Gibson.
Heather Gibbons, 1008 Garden Street. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you because it really was very inspiring to work with the mayor and this united council and the administration and secure Union Dry Dock for the public. I credit the mayor and his vision and his commitment to that, to building a park for Hoboken there, and I believe that's what he wants. And it's why it's so depressing to find ourselves here. So, where we're going to hand over Union Dry Dock to New York Waterway for refueling, storage, and repair. And they've got our $13 million. Soon to be 18 million, right? So let's, what I urge you tonight is to reconsider this lease, please. If it's easier to table it, let's do that. But please consider saying no. To listen to Noel's story about New York Waterway, one of the biggest concerns that I have and the Fund for Better Waterfront has is there's no mechanism for enforcement. I was in an elevator the other day and it said, if you smoke, it's $250. Well, you know, it's not just don't smoke in the elevator, Heather, right? So if New York Waterway is going to be on this site and they're going to endanger someone, then they better pay or void the lease or something. So let's do a better job of that, please, because let's remember who we're talking about. New York Waterway, if you remember, these are the guys who heavily subsidized by the Fed, by the state, and now by us for $5,000 a month. These are the guys that defrauded the federal government of money. They were incredibly investigated by the EPA for dumping raw sewage in the Hudson River for years. Let's see, what else? The Coast Guard pulled 23 of the 32 boats because they didn't pass inspection. And now we're going to give these guys a 3 to 5 year lease, and not to mention the environmental element of these diesel boats. 5 years from now, we're going to be supporting diesel boats. Now, I appreciate the New York Waterway has made some effort to do some electric and hybrid boats, and that's a good thing. And maybe we'll get some of those boats, as you suggested. So, the other thing I'd like to remind you is that this property was purchased with open space trust fund money. And I believe that's what you're supposed to use it for. We're not supposed to turn it over to a private company. It's supposed to be used for public space. And I don't think it's legal to do what we're doing. Finally, I would just like to remind all of us that it was Ron Hine who stood here in 2016 and said, we should buy Union Dry Dock. And it was like half the price then, right? I don't know how much it was then.
15.
Right. And even less before then.
Less before then, right?
Right, exactly. So, and that was before Union Dry Dock, before New York Waterway slipped there in the middle of the night in 2017 in November and bought it without telling any of the public officials. This highly subsidized company didn't tell anybody that they were going to do this, right? And started this whole battle. So I would just like to say all of us should pay attention. If Ron Hine is, thinks this is a bad deal, it should give us all pause. So please, I urge you to reconsider this lease, either table it, say no to it, give the administration some leverage to go back to New York Waterway and say, you know what? You need to do better because the people of Hoboken said no. Thank you.
Marian Draka.
Marian Draka.
Mayor Andreka, 159 9th Street. Well, I haven't talked about Union Dry Dock in 3 years, and not all the public thinks the way I do. Number one, you have to pass this, and you will. Number two, a deal was done because they have nowhere to go. It was their land, and you just took it by eminent domain. Three, you paid $13 million, but that's not the final cost. My understanding is you agreed to pay $18 million, but that will be discussed in court. Now, I think everybody here, not you, is overreacting. Number one, it may just work out fine, because number two, if everyone read everything in the agreements, they will be refueling at night, and I don't believe, maybe they do, kayakers go kayaking at night, but I don't think so. They will also make some repairs, and basically, they're just going to sit there and repair their boats. I don't know how many are going to be docked there, but it really won't be noticed. And I think that everything has just been blown totally out of proportion. The governor, I believe, agreed with this because he had to, although he promised this city it would be a park, but there were stipulations. So everybody telling everybody to table it, you can't. You've got to pass it, and I want you to pass it. You have no choice, and you know you don't. They tried to get you to table the rent control thing 2 weeks ago. Of course, we know where that went. So if they were in this audience, they would have understood that they're wasting their breath out there. New Jersey Transit also has refused forever to allow New York Waterway at the terminal. And you all know that, and so does Ron Hine. And the reason is it's a very traffic place, even after pandemic. And the more people will eventually go into the city, it will build up through the years. In this last week's Jersey Journal, Weehawken doesn't want them. Hoboken doesn't want them. So I read carefully the entire questions that the mayor had sent out. I had no problem with it. He explained it all. It's very clear. So I'm calm about it. Nothing's going to happen. It's all going to work out fine. They will be there for 5 years because they have nowhere to go. And you all know that too. So the mayor alluded to the fact that possibly they could go out of business. Of course, that's not going to affect me because I don't take the ferry. But a lot of people uptown do in their fancy condos that cost lots of money and they can just slip over on the ferry. Well, maybe they'll have to take a bus downtown to take the path. But this is not a problem. The mayor has no problem with it. He's more than bent over backwards. And we'll see in 5 years what happens. There'll be different people in office. There'll be a different governor. Maybe we'll be a little more underwater. So the fact is, this is just sort of comical to me that everyone is freaking out. Pass it tonight like you will. It's one of the few times I'm actually in agreement with you.
Roberto Vettorelli.
I wish I could follow. It's a tough, cynical act to follow, but I think that the lease, is very explicit in certain things and very obscure about others, and we don't have enough information, nor I think do you have enough information. But one thing which I guess you've answered is that the maturity in 2027, June 30, 2027, I imagine that's the maturity of the 3 years starting from June 30, 2024, which would be the start of the lease. So we're talking about 2029. But, the Section 2.6 noise. I want to read the last sentence because I cannot believe that actually this is something that you will contemplate. Landlord further agrees that he will not object to tenants' operations on the grounds that the noise generated therefrom constitutes a public or private nuisance. This is one of the main reasons that Weehawken wants them out. It's noisy. Why are we even signing a lease saying noisy is okay for us? I thought the next one was going to be that we're not going to be subject to environmental laws, but I understand that environmental laws are federal, so city can't actually legally impose a lease where that says you can violate federal laws. But this thing is so one-sided, and I mean, it struck me even in the comment that Jason Freeman did today, when we were asking something simple as like what the height is of the. Oh, we'll have to discuss it with. I've been to planning board meetings. The planning board tells you what the height has to be, or the zoning board. It's not like we have to kowtow to them. But also, where are the answers to the following questions? Orders coming from the operation. environmental air quality. Do we have ordinances already in place that regulate how much the engines can run before departure? I was talking to experts from the DC area. They control the amount of pollution by having very strict regulations of no more than, the engines can run no more than 30 minutes before departure. And they have standards for air quality emissions. In here, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the 5 million, the difference between the 13 and the 18 is for them to build the new facility. Is that going to be spent on improving the current a location that they're going to have for 5 years? Or is that going to be only used to pay for the new location or improvements on the new location? Because one of the issues that the expert said to me, the biggest issue with the noise is running the engines. And even if they do just cleaning, they have to run the engines unless they have shore power to hook up into. Now, he looked at the piers, and they're very deteriorated, and it's going to cost a lot of money to get the amount of power that you need to power 20 ferries, which, by the way, are approximately 90 feet each, according to the specifications on the model that I was able to find. And they go as high as 110 feet. What is the fuel distribution on the docks? Is it going to be, are they going to have an underground fuel distribution set up? Is it going to be directly from the truck to each ferry? Is it going to go into an underwater tank and then to the ferries? Do you even have any answers to those questions? You do. We don't, because we haven't seen it.
In the lease.
Huh?
Says it in the lease.
Well, I mean, it's not clear to me what, then the Coast Guard in most situations is the one who regulates and enforces the adherence to the pollution. What is their agreement with the Coast Guard to do any sort of enforcement with respect to this?
Mr. Berthley, if you could just wrap up your comments, please.
How many deliveries a day? Has Stevens been notified that the noise is going to be basically affecting one of their dorms right up the mountain there? And you, how can you, Council President, what are you going to say to those mothers who can't tell you that the kids can't sleep, or they can't sleep? Or mothers who finally, their kids say, oh, look, the water is now purple. I mean, what are you going to say?
Mr. Berthley, if you could just wrap up your comments, please.
Okay, so we need, and when the mayor says 2/3 is going to be for the new park, we just heard it's 1/3. What's the right amount that's going to be that's going to be into the new park?
There are a number
right
of people signed up to speak,
Thank
and I
you.
just wish to be fair to everyone with their 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Berthley.
James Vance.
That's not your work, James. Cite the work, James.
I just borrowed it from Ron. It's all his fault. I'm Jim Vance. Thank you very much for allowing me to address this. I'd like to look at a big picture. Ever since we woke up 10 or however many years ago and found out that New York Waterways had snatched Union Dry Dock site away from us, we have all worked very hard to try to turn that around and get Hoboken's waterfront connected. And the mayor and members of the council now and before, and lots of good citizens, it's been really terrific. And it's appreciated all the way around. We now find ourselves in a circumstance where Union Dry Dock is going to be used for a short period of time, we hope, as the facility that we didn't want. we, I believe, have ourselves in a circumstance where, for a variety of political reasons, have to deal with that. I can tell you that the people in Weehawken and the mayor of Weehawken, they don't want the Union Dry Dock refueling, maintenance, so on and so forth facility in their neck of the woods any more than we do in ours. Mayor Turner is smart, powerful, wily, and will do everything he can to make sure that once the facility is running down here, that it never goes back up there. So the lease, which we are going to have to sign a lease, New York Waterways, has to really be absolutely ironclad. I got a note from Councilwoman Fisher, who sent it out to everybody, and she has some thoughts about how to tighten this lease up. And I think some others of you have some thoughts. And so I'm encouraging you to really tighten up the lease. Meanwhile, New York Waterways, Ron's right, had permission, New Jersey Transit, on the south side of the terminal building, there was going to be the complete operation for New York Waterways. It was approved. Jersey Transit bought into it. Corps of Engineers bought in. It is all ready to go. So what I'm saying is that Hoboken has to participate and is participating. But that down on the south end of that terminal, we can dock some ferries. You don't have to dock them all up here, and that has to be part of the lease as well. So thank you very much. Don't get rolled by Richard Turner.
There are no more members of the public signed up to speak on this ordinance. Motion to close public portion. All in favor?
Aye.
Council members.
Want me to go first?
Sure. I have a feeling you have comments.
I do. So I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Jim's already sighing, so it's a bad sign. Yeah, it's okay. I expect a few more. As I sent in my the note that I sent out yesterday, this has been incredibly difficult, and I think it's because everyone's been very hopeful. It hasn't been 10 years, although it feels like it's 10 years. It's been since it was actually. I think we were down in Trenton in January of 2018, so it's been 5 years. I can tell you since I've been on the city council, like as soon as I was elected, one of the first people, and I knew Ron through Monarch, Ron and Jim sat me down and said, we need to talk about Union Dry Dock. And they're like, we have to buy it, we have to buy it. We know they want to sell, we know they want to sell. I had multiple conversations with Councilman Doyle, Councilman Giattino, then Councilman Bala, former Councilman Cunningham, trying to get our prior mayor to buy it, and we missed the opportunity. So as I said, this is, it's been a terrible situation that Mayor Bala inherited, and quite honestly, through this point, I feel like we've all been in lockstep on and really continuing the fight for our waterfront that started 3 decades ago, on this location. And I think the struggle is, I feel like the public with what we're being asked to vote on just feels very let down because it feels very inconsistent with what we've all fought for. And I think Ruth McMorrow said it best tonight. I was trying to find a succinct way to say it. Does this lease incentivize New York Waterway to leave, or does it incentivize New York Waterway to stay? And every single provision in this lease is really built to effectively invite New York Waterway to invest, expand, and stay forever. The positive of it, and I think it's a huge positive, is the site is effectively being divided. We are getting to expand the walkway, which I hear from a lot of people, a lot of people use that walkway. We are getting to have a small piece of open space that better ties the skate park, to the waterfront. You know, we're getting 2/3 probably. I think you saw the number of 2/3 in the Nixle Classic, you know, propaganda. It's 2/3 of the upland site. It's not 2/3 of the whole site. The whole site, the majority of the site is water, of which will be used by New York Waterway. But I think the kind of where we are now, we could have been in a better position, right? You know, we all got surprised. 2 weeks ago, the city council wasn't given the lease until an hour before the meeting. We were given an overview. There was no details in it, and we were asked to vote on something that the public wasn't even given on. So the first vote we had was the public wasn't even given the terms until after we voted on first reading, which, as I said to Jim that night, and our Councilman Doyle and I've said before, the public just doesn't have a chance in these situations. Anything controversial, lots of effort to keep it from the public. But here we are. I was hoping over the course of the last 2 weeks that we'd get feedback from the public. We'd be able to come up with maybe some ideas on what we could do just to tighten it. Even if we have to live with a 3-year lease and 2-year extension, you know, what are the things that we could do to make it tighter? And I just want to walk through a couple of those, just so my colleagues hear them tonight, and maybe they will consider these as well. The most important thing is there's nothing in this lease that ties it to the Weehawken redevelopment. So we don't say the rent's going to go up if they don't start the redevelopment in Weehawken. We allow them to come and actually occupy this space irrespective of if they move forward in Weehawken. We allow them to fuel on our site, not at all tied to them building in Weehawken. They just literally can decide one day they don't want to fuel in Weehawken anymore, and suddenly all the fueling gets done on our site. Those are changes that we can make. We can tighten up that language. So right now the lease term is tied to when they get their permits, which it sounds like is 1.5 years from now. So we're not talking about 3 and 5 years. We're talking about 4.5 to 6.5 years from today. It's a long time. We could change the refueling condition to tie it specifically to only when they start building the Weehawken development. We can require, like the boats, as Heather mentioned when she was up here, they are starting to change their fleet to hybrid and electrical. So why don't we require that all of the hybrid and electricals come on our site, so we have less of the diesel fuel ones? We can minimize the amount of horn noise allowed. It's going to be incredibly disruptive, all this noise to the surrounding neighborhoods up in Castle Point, on Hudson Street, and Maxwell in particular. We can require regular meetings between the boathouse and New York Waterway. And the one thing that we haven't said is there's nothing in the lease that prohibits New York Waterway technically from using the water side of the north side of their pier. So these are things that we could just go in and literally just tighten up. And we have an opportunity to do that. And these ideas weren't my ideas. These ideas came from, you know, the many emails that people reached out to me saying, what about this? What about this? And had we just had a seat at that table like we've had since the very beginning, we could have had a lease that had all of this in it. And I think we have an opportunity. We can table it tonight and incorporate some of these and just have a better lease to vote on in 2 weeks. We've waited this long. We should be able to wait another 2 or 4 weeks. The one last thing I want to say is I just want to give a Mayor Turner story. You know, Mayor Turner's made it very clear that he's not going to allow He's just not going to, he controls the planning board in Weehawken, and he's not going to allow the planning board to approve their redevelopment in Weehawken. I was at a meeting for the Gateway Tunnel a couple years ago, which is the big tunnel going under the water, and it's disrupting the area on the north side of Hoboken. And originally they were going to be pulling all the dirt from the digging of the tunnel and pull it out right by the shades, right at our border, Hoboken, and that residential area. And Mayor Turner stood up and said to New Jersey Transit, Port Authority, and Amtrak, There's no way we're going to let that happen. He's like, well, that's the plan. So he's like, let me be very clear. I'm going to literally dig up all of the roads around your site so you will not have access to your site. I will not allow you to do it. And I spoke to the government relations people for two of them, New Jersey Transit and Port Authority, and they both said, he's not kidding. They were had a oh sugar moment, and they actually redesigned the Gateway Tunnel project and moved that part of it on the other side on Tonelli Avenue. Mayor Turner is not going to let this Weehawken facility go, and we should be thinking about that. We should be as strong for our residents as Mayor Turner is being as strong for theirs. So all that being said, I am going to vote no tonight, but I'm going to say one more thing. I know it's been long, but you know what? This has been my word. It's been my fight, and these are not, Union Dry Docks and Jen's word, but this is the people that have been most active have been in my word. We shouldn't even. We're lucky we're this far. Realistically should have lost this battle day one, and this may be the best that this mayor can get out of it. This is what he's saying, that this is the very best deal that he can get out of it. And that may just be the reality. I think that if we had more people at the table like we've had for the last 5 years, we could have gotten a better deal. But it's not like we have this, we are fighting a major transportation company. There is zero chance they will let New York Waterway fail. As a matter of fact, New York Waterway is expanding, and New Jersey Transit, Governor Murphy, every major, elected official in the state is supportive of New York Waterway expanding. So 5 years from now, I would put all of my savings on the table. There's a zero chance that we'll get them out. So we should just be thinking that. And you know what? I think the mayor knows that, and he should be a little bit more forthcoming and honest about it, and we would not feel as let down if our expectations were managed along the way. It's been a difficult fight, a really difficult fight, but I appreciate everyone coming out. I appreciate everyone who's fought for 5 years, and I hope we have an opportunity to just make this lease better for Hoboken if we have to have them as our neighbor for whatever period of time. Thanks.
Councilman Doyle?
Thank you, Council President. Well, I am appreciative of those who, and many of you who came up and thanked the administration for their efforts to get to this point. I do think that some of the criticism of the deal is misplaced. I don't want to be, one of these people who say, I do this for a living and I know what I'm talking about. But obviously, if you ask our lawyers to draft the best lease for us, that'll be great. The terms will be great, but the other side won't sign it. So there is an element of a compromise here in saying this provision isn't good enough. This one's vague. It doesn't acknowledge the reality that if we were to make all the changes that everyone thinks would make the lease a better lease, then the other side would say, fine, we will agree to that. If they were to agree to it, they would then say, but now we need these other things in exchange for that, and then we'd all be reading the lease again, and we would be seeing that those changes that we had to concede would be a problem. So it's not that our team is not doing a good enough job. It's not that they didn't think of these things. We've been fighting for 5 years to get this property, and this is we're fighting up against a deadline, and this is the best we can do. I mean, I've heard, and I don't want to put words in Ron's mouth or anyone else, but he intimated that if this were a 1-year lease, that might be okay, but it's the 3 years and the 5 that are the problem. And so it seems it's a matter of degree, and I think the amount of time it'll take to design
to contract and to start building a park is certainly 3 years, as we learned in the Northwest. So time will go by quickly. To some of the other comments with regard to, why is it 5,000 instead of 500,000? We're not going into the business of being a industrial landlord. We're not buying this property so that we can run a shipyard or a dry dock or a fueling station. We're just accepting the reality that in order to get these people out of there, we have to concede and give them a certain amount of time. And we own the land, which will be a very different situation. We will own the land, and they're agreeing to that. And if we delay for 2 weeks so we can, ask for $500,000 a year as opposed to $50,000, or, to change the terms materially that way, they will go to court, which they have a deadline, and they will, God knows what we'll get in court, because we have not done, I don't think this is in Hoboken, when you get a jury deciding or a judge deciding what the appraised value actually is, the 18 number could be a lot more. So, this is not something that I think it's a good day, because we have a definite 5-year term. If the state of New Jersey in 5 years says you have to keep this in your city and we will use eminent domain to take your land away from you so that they can keep it there, I don't think there's any lease in the world that will protect us for that. So many of the suggestions about what we can put in the lease, when you rent an apartment, you don't say, and you shouldn't kill your spouse. There are other laws. There are environmental laws out there that apply regardless of what this lease says. There are, the noise violations, everything. I'm supportive of this. It's frustrating for everyone, but I do think that this is not a political thing. Someone came up and said, for political reasons, we're doing this. It's for practical reasons. 5 years later, this is the deal that we have, and it's certainly a lot better than missing the opportunity and having uncertainty and maybe not getting the property at all. So I do support it.
Council President? It's always nice when Ron and Jim come up to that microphone, because they always remind me about things that happen in the city. That institutional knowledge is really important. And although we've been talking about this 5-year period when it comes to Union Dry Dock, I'm going to take it back 5 years prior to that, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the former owner of Union Dry Dock approached the city of Hoboken multiple times with multiple offers. The final offer to then Mayor Zimmer was to sell Union Dry Dock to the city of Hoboken for about $8 million. I wish that 10 years ago, we had some of our elected officials, currently and past, fighting as hard as they are now to make sure we acquire that land then, because then we wouldn't be in this situation. However, we are where we are. I find myself having the conversation more and more about what our role is as a city council member, and I appreciate Manny coming up and asking for how and why we came to our decisions. The reality is that we don't make these decisions in a vacuum. Just like you don't make decisions at home in a vacuum. What are you eating tonight? That decision is based on 1,000 things, right? How much money you have in your pocket, what you're in the mood for, what your kids want. All those things come into play. Same thing happens here in the city of Hoboken. When we're talking about something as simple as a lease, it's not as simple as a lease. We had a member of the public come up and talk about what the fair market value of potential lease would be. Well, we didn't take into consideration what the fair market value of the land is. Because the reality is, we're getting that land for about $18.5 million. I'd probably argue that that's not the fair market value that the city's making out on that deal. But that comes into play when we're talking about the lease. So there's a lot of what ofs, what can we, maybe if, all of that comes into play. I get it. But at what cost? In a perfect world, in 5 years from now, maybe the mayor starts digging up roads. Maybe that's what happens. But the reality is we need to do something. That's where we sit right now. So at what cost do we make those decisions? When you're making that type of a decision, you have to take in all those factors into consideration. And for me, cost of that property is most certainly one. It will be locked into about that $18.5 million. If we continue down the path of an eminent domain where that's contested in court, that number may go up drastically. So for me, I am supportive tonight. I think it's important that we finalize this deal, get it finished, and then work to make sure it gets better over the course of this lease agreement. Whether that's this current mayor, the next mayor, or anyone in between. You need to get what's in front of you handled. And that's how my decision is being made. So I hope that helps, and I hope my colleagues would agree, and I hope we could pass this tonight.
Councilman Ramos, did you want to make any comments? Sure.
Sorry. First, clarification. I wanted to point out that both Councilman Ramos and I were not on the city council 10 years ago. And so the price is no reflection on our competence. Second, while I do plan to support this ordinance, I do want to make it clear that there's no love between me and your waterways. Back during Hurricane Sandy, when the path was shut down, a lot of us were forced to take the ferry back then. It was pretty expensive on my budget. And one time the app didn't work and they ate $6 of my dollars, which they've never returned to me. So I do not have any love for that organization. But with that being said, there are a lot of folks who rely on it every day. It is one of our major transportation methods between here and New York City and parts of North. So what I want to address today is a couple points: the why now, some of the safety issues, and a couple other matters. Councilman Doyle focused on the why now aspect a little bit, and really the timing here is critical. We do own the land by legal right. However, the New York Waterways has an opportunity to contest that, and their deadline to contest that is between now and the next council meeting. So if we do not vote today, they will be compelled to contest it, make those filings, and then they will probably be in a less of an agreeable position to move forward here. So the timing really is of the essence. And in addition to that, once we do finally sign this lease and agree to it, we can move on. We have clarity. We have a definitive price. As folks mentioned, right now there's that $13 million that we've deposited. But that, when it goes to litigation, if it goes to litigation, would likely change. So we get clarity that we're going to be paying $18.5 million, which I agree is a pretty good price for prime waterfront real estate in Hoboken. With respect to the safety issues and some of the other refueling issues, my understanding is that the movement of boats will happen before 6 a.m. and after 10 p.m. So hopefully that does a lot to mitigate some of those issues with kayakers. That being said, of course, because there will be routine meetings between the community and New York Waterways, we expect folks to hold them to account to that agreement. With respect to refueling, in the lease, it does mention that refueling must occur not as a primary instance, only if their primary refueling stations elsewhere are being occupied, and it must occur on land with a truck. There is some provisions where if there's extraordinary circumstances, they can do it via barge, but it should be with the truck and not the primary thing. Some other comments are geared towards why are we letting Weehawken dictate what we do. I actually see this as the reverse. We are saying frankly, we don't care what happens with Hoboken. You're out of here in 5 years, or there's going to be some severe penalties and we'll evict them. As opposed to tying it to, hey, we won't assign this unless you get your permits, we'll never sign an agreement then. With respect to Hoboken Terminal, my understanding is that's a non-starter. The state has said, hey, we might have agreed to whatever years ago, but today's today and forget it. But then ultimately, it comes down to, in my opinion, yeah, I agree. We're going to have a facility on this site that we don't want. The mayor did say there won't be a refueling site here, and I don't know what he meant at the time, but one can assume he meant there won't be one forever. This is a use that we don't want here, but it's a temporary use, 3 to 5 years. If you ask me to sacrifice 5 years where they'll be using a third of the land, which if they fought and won, they'd actually have all of the land and a permanent refueling facility. 3 to 5 years in exchange for 100 years of a park, I'll take that deal any day. So I'm voting yes.
I don't want to repeat what prior council members had said, but I think last council meeting, the topic of eminent domain did come up with regards to Academy and the Posey property, and this is a similar situation where we declared a eminent domain on the property, but then we entered into good faith negotiations with the property owner and able to fix a price with that good faith negotiations. But the unknown, again, could be if we don't have this price now and we do go to court, what could that price be down the road? And I'm for one that likes amicable negotiations as opposed to court negotiations. So that's why I'll be voting in favor of this tonight. I'd rather have the price fixture, knowing we have control of the land for the long-term future, for future generations to enjoy, and hopefully, I believe that they won't be there in 5 years from now, and hopefully find a different location. But again, different governors, different places. But I believe if we steadfast in this course of action, on the hostile course of action, they won't be there in 5 years if we're partners with them in this relationship next 5 years. Thank you.
Councilman GTO?
Thank you. I believe they will be there in 5 years. There's no point in us all going through what the past looked like with Union Dry Dock, because the past is the past, and we really only have the future to look at. And I know that obviously it's going to pass tonight, but I really feel strongly that anyone who is sitting on this dais that votes yes is literally saying to you, here is nothing, hold on to it tightly. That's what they're saying to you. So I urge you all to vote now. Thank you.
Councilman Cohen?
Thank you, Council President. Actually, I think there is something that we'll be getting here tonight if this passes. Now, I was at New Jersey Transit in Newark with a lot of you when Governor Christie, in the last days of his administration, tried to do a backdoor deal with New Jersey Transit to basically take the property away from us. And a lot of you were in the room with me and with Mayor Bala at that time, and we won that day. And that day, in a lot of ways, has created where we've gotten here today. Because we were able to fight off that deal and lose control at a time when the mayor made his statements about New York Waterway operating, we were out of control. We had no seat at the table. We did not have any input with respect to that deal. We found out about it with a public meeting notice, and then we, chartered the buses and head down to Newark and tried to have the power of the press. The New York Times was there with us, and the leaders of our community, and the leaders of Fund for Better Waterfront, and the people in Maxwell Place, and everyone came down there and stopped what was going to be essentially robbing this community of its waterfront. And we did that day. And here we are on the verge. It's not just a lease agreement, it's a settlement agreement. This is a settlement agreement. There is an active condemnation proceeding pending in court right now before a judge where we have our $13.1 million. It's not someone made a suggestion that New York Waterway is sitting on the money. No, they're not. The money is sitting in a bank account by the court of the state of New Jersey. That's where that money is right now. And it's pending a final determination as to what is the valuation of the park that we so desperately want to own. And the only time that we're actually going to own that land is when a judge agrees that this is the value of the property and the city of Hoboken is entitled as proper owner. If we, Councilman Quintero referred to the timing issue with respect to a pleading in that case that's going to be happening between this council meeting and the next. And in that pleading, if this does not get tied up and sealed before our next council meeting, New York Waterway will be able to sign, they will have to put in a pleading which will contest, among other things, our right to even take this land, let alone the valuation of the land. There are serious questions as to the propriety of our taking the land that they can raise and have adjudicated. All of that will be addressed per agreement by New York Waterway. So when we talk about what about Weehawken, the value of us doing this is that we're deciding our fate. We are putting a price on the valuation of the property that we've fought so hard to acquire. So many battles that we've won to get to this place. Someone said that it's very unlikely that we would be in this position when you have the powers that be aligned against you, and that's true. That's true. This is truly a success story that we're going to be able to be in a position to actually set a price to acquire this land at a price that the city council has already bonded for, that has already agreed for, that will not cost the taxpayers any additional money. So some people asked about, what about the rent? What about the rent? Councilman Doyle made the clear point that we're not getting into the business of commercial ferry operations. That's not the goal here. The goal is to own the land forever so that we can plan the park, so we can start building the park that we saw in the presentation at the beginning of our meeting tonight, where we can actually start having parking spots added, where we can have tree-lined Sinatra Drive. That will start. What will we see? We will start seeing our park built now. We will have that park on the timeline that was presented tonight. In December of 24, that park will be complete. The planning will be done this summer. That's going to go forward. If we do not go forward with this tonight, we will not be able to have the ability to take down that fence, to move that wall, to rebuild our parking, to design the Sinatra Drive Park that we are so enthusiastic about. We will not get that. When we start buying and building out that park, it will be that much harder to turn back the clock. Once we start the process going forward with the park, that process will continue, and it'll be that much harder for the state or anyone else to take it away from us. And again, with Weehawken, the idea of trying to link this to Weehawken, I believe would take control away from the city of Hoboken, because people suggest that Mayor Turner does what Mayor Turner does. I would not want the future of our land to be tied in any way to what Mayor Turner does. I would like us to make this arm's length deal, which has been done by the mayor, who has the authority in our form of government to make this deal, and do it and go forward with it. There are people on this council who've run for mayor or wish that they were mayor, and they're not. They're not the mayor. It's our job to vote up or vote down what the mayor negotiates, not to renegotiate a deal, particularly when we're looking at the particular time pressure and the potential adverse consequences on the future ownership of our property and the price of the land that the taxpayers are going to have to fund, that we have already allocated the money for. It is paid for. This council's approved the expenditure for no additional money. That deal will be done. And finally, the price, some people have suggested, why this price, why the rent? It was explained to the city council that the rent matches what the taxes are that are being paid on that land currently. So the idea here is that essentially it's a holding pattern. It's to keep in place. After 3 years, that rent will double, and there will be additional, and I think the mayor has identified additional consequences if they don't leave to us. But the point here is that Corporation Council has advised that if there are violations of the lease, we can proceed to pursue those violations in court. As a landlord, we have rights that we don't have right now. We can exercise those rights in court, and we will pursue them vigilantly. I appreciate the comments that Noel made, that she has been heard, that the mayor and his administration has taken the accounts of the kayakers into serious consideration in this lease and adopted all of your suggestions. I think that is working with stakeholders. And I do think that while some were critical of the Nixle alert, the effort was made in that Nixle alert to be comprehensive and address the point of view of the people who are at the table making the deal and why they're doing it in the interest of the city of Hoboken. Thank you, Council President.
Council President, just for clarification, we do own the land. We own the land. The price of the price has not been determined, but we own the land.
Councilman,
For clarification, a judge will determine who owns the land. And that, no.
Mayor keeps telling us that we own the land.
We own the land.
Mayor Bala has said repeatedly we own the land.
There is a
So
risk.
it's lying.
No, there is a
we own
risk.
the land or do we not?
No, there is a risk that it may not work out the way we expect.
Correct.
It is
We
not,
may pay more,
no.
but we own the land.
members, I would like to give
many
Councilman
times do you wanna
DeFusco an opportunity to speak. He's on the phone. Councilman DeFusco? You there? Can you hear him?
Thank you very much. I didn't know if the business administrator was going to continue to answer the question. Listen, I think everyone's made a wonderful point, but I just want to take a step back and say politics is the art of the possible. And what everybody is saying to me sounds like the same thing. We want a protected waterfront. We want a park. We don't want fueling, steps from where kayakers, kayak, and steps from, one of the largest housing complexes in all of the city, Maxwell. But to get to this place of this agreement, so many council people have correctly summarized it, but I will give you my personal belief is that I hammered Mayor Zimmer when she refused to buy Union Dry Dock when it was on sale for $11 million. So I'm on the record as saying it. I hammered the administration for the mistake of not zoning it correctly, because at that time, there's this assumption, this faulty assumption that I have also hammered the previous administration on a number of other projects, including Monarch, that if you leave underlying zoning at such a low level, eventually a property owner will simply just sell it. But that's not the case, right? Property owners can do a lot of things with industrial. And we saw that in many places across town, but we're seeing it here as well. I ride New York Waterway to the city. I work on 57th Street, and it's an essential artery for me to get there. I know thousands of people do the same because I see them waiting online every day. We cannot penalize a major transportation provider for doing a service to our city. New York Waterway also isn't some sort of political kingmaker. They're not behind the scenes controlling the mayor or any council person. They're a transit operator, right? So this notion that somehow this administration has cracked a deal is kind of comical. I will let you know if I see something that's suspicious, but I don't see anything suspicious here. What I see is a good contract for $18.5 million that secures a waterfront piece of property looking over Midtown Manhattan with a value that I believe is probably closer to $40 million. Why on earth would we want to go into a court of law and leave it to a judge to decide the final price? Because that would be super financially irresponsible, because we couldn't then start to budget for what this park is going to cost. We couldn't start to figure out what the final cost of what all these improvements are. We couldn't start to figure out what soil remediation is necessary, because we don't know how much the property is going to cost, and it would take years to get there. So I started out by saying politics is the art of the possible. There's nothing perfect in life, but there is good intentions, and I see every member of this council having good intentions, including the two council members that may not support this. I know that their hearts are in the right place, and I know that the mayor and the rest of the council that may support this have really thoroughly vetted this. You've heard me say this before. Let's concentrate on working together to bring Hoboken to the next level. This is doing that. Let's not take personal stabs at one another. Let's move this forward. Let's continue the community conversation about what will make a better, brighter future for Hoboken. And I can't wait to sit with every member of the public that's in the room tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. To work with them to see and find what they want to see on this space, because it's going to really be the next generation of Hoboken. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. I'll just wrap up to say, I think the most important thing for me is to realize that this is, despite the history that's kind of been recounted here and the fact that the city, I think, has had a very challenging and adversarial process to get to this point, in terms of my role where we are now, I'm not willing to let the opportunity pass. And even if that means signing onto a lease that there are potentially some need for additional clarifications to make it perfect, I will not pretend to be a lawyer. I will not pretend to have been in the room. What I know my job tonight is to vote yes or no on the contract that's before us. And by voting yes, we assure that we have the best possible position at the table to move forward with acquisition of this site for generations to come. Mr. Farina, please call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Fisher?
No.
Giantino?
No.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
President Jabour?
Yes.
A hearing on an ordinance amending Chapter 39 and 58 for permitted activities associated with fees in city parks and public property. There's no speakers signed up for this.
There are no members of the public signed up to speak. Motion to close.
Public portion.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any council members on this? Mr. Farina, call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Giantino?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo? President Jabour?
Yes.
Hearing on an ordinance amending Chapter 190-6 entitled No Stopping or Standing on Hudson Street. Manuel Rivera Sola.
Thank you. Ms. Andreka, did you want to sign up to speak on this item? Sure, come on up.
Mayor Andreka, 159 9th Street. Told you had to vote for it. Okay, I would like to know. I saw this before. What do you mean there's no stopping or standing on Hudson Street? Could this be easily explained to me in one sentence? As a person, you can't stop on Hudson Street? Or why is vehicles can't stand? The
No.
A
vehicles,
certain location.
Council
but
President,
that's stopping, correct? Not people.
Not people.
do you want me to respond?
Humans can do whatever.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but that's not the correct grammar. But that I'll let it go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other members signed up? Jimmy? Anyone else signed up to speak on this? Nope. Okay, there are no more members of the public signed up to speak. Motion to close public portion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You want me to give
Councilwoman
the
Fisher,
pretty-
go for it.
Mary, what this is it's a part of Hudson Street up by 14th. It's the no stopping and standing area, and it's just changing the size of it. That's all this is. It's shrinking it and allowing more parking spaces. Okay? Yep.
Any other comments? Mr. Farina, call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco? Mr. Doyle? Fisher?
Yes.
Giantino?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
Excuse me, President Jabour.
Yes.
A hearing on an ordinance revoking Chapter 79 and 158. Manuel Rivera Sola, speaker.
Sure. Anyone else? There are no more members of the public signed up to speak. Motion to close public portion.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Council members? Mr. Farina, call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle? Fisher?
Yes.
Giantino?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
President Jabour.
Yes.
We have
Public portion on resolutions.
speakers on resolutions. Mary Andreka, Resolution E2 and T2. Oh, I'm sorry. We had, first was Manuel Rivera Solas on the consent agenda.
Well, Mary's already coming up, so
Mary?
Mary, come on up.
Mary's there.
I signed up for E2. Did I sign up?
Whatever you want.
Yes, you can just go ahead. And T2.
E2 and T2.
Do I get 7 minutes? Do we still have that rule?
We're still at 5 minutes.
But I have 2 resolutions.
Yes.
I get 7 minutes.
Okay, I'm good.
I won't take
It's-
7 minutes.
It's 5, but go ahead.
Okay, Marion Draco, 159 9th Street. I wanted to ask about that E2.
Going blind.
I have to say that's sticker shock for me. The $1,174,146.90 for the development of a concept design. A concept design for the former Union Dry Dock site. That's a lot of money, and I would hope that, I guess you bid that out, and that, I don't know if you've used this Daytoner Architects before, have you? Just yes or no? But that is a lot of money. And considering how nobody can count their chickens before they're hatched, as they say, yes, we may own the land right now, but doesn't mean we'll own it in the future, because there's still that nasty little thing called New Jersey Transit. But I'm not here to tell the future, but I think that's a lot of money to put down for a park concept. I think that's probably one of the most expensive I've ever seen in front of this council. I think it's outrageous. You still are going to have to fork over millions to buy the land, and you still have to wait for the court to agree, because I remember the figure that it was valued at 26 million, maybe 27, but it was not 18 million. That was what you agreed to, or they agreed to, but still that's not, I don't believe anything is finished until it's over. So I think this is an extraordinary amount of money to spend for a concept design. And I think that the councilors should be a little bit more prudent and a little more thrifty. Thank you. Oh, and I must talk about T2. T2 is, yes, the Sinatra, what we asked questions about. The redesign, right. I'm assuming that went out to bid? Or did someone just get appointed to do that? I don't know. I looked at the diagram that was on there, and I couldn't understand what some of that, maybe that was the Union Dry Dock. But I'm assuming that that was designed, that final design is in connection with what they are hoping to do with the architect, rather the concept guy for the Union Dry Dock. Correct?
Correct.
Is it both working in tandem?
That's what we saw tonight, yes.
Okay, all right. And there is no, when they always say final, I always laugh about that final. There's no chance that this will alter because of some unforeseen issue along the road? Or is you're sticking to it?
Low chance.
No change?
Low chance.
Low chance?
Yeah, I mean, who knows what'll happen in the future, but
This is just surface work. There's underground work happening here. It's just surface, so it'll be a lot easier than Washington Street was.
I hope so. And when will it start is my last thing. I just want to know, when will this start, the work? I didn't follow it enough to know when it would start.
March.
2023
No,
20,
March
the end of 2023? Okay, so it's starting there.
itself. It's the end of 2023. Cool.
Okay, all right, just want to clarify. Thank you very much.
Ron Hine.
Council President, it is 7 minutes. I just sent it to you.
I think I'll check the rule.
I just sent you the
I'll
rules.
revisit it. Thank you.
I could have said it loud.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Sorry. What's the concern now?
Ron
I'm sorry.
Hine.
I got pulled in a different conversation. I'm sorry. What's the concern?
Tricia is claiming she's signed up and that we're ignoring her.
The clerk has the list, and he makes.
Signed up for, I don't know.
I'm sorry. Can we let Mr. Hine continue, and then Ms. Waiters will make sure you're signed up for resolutions as well. This is on resolutions right now. That's a different list.
But you didn't put what you were signed up.
Ms. Waiters, we'll make sure that you're called. Ms. Waiters, we'll make sure that you're called. Could we let Mr. Hines come up, and we'll make sure that you're on the list. Thank you very much. You may speak on T2 now, yes. This is public comment on resolutions.
T2, yes.
Okay,
Any
good.
resolution you'd
Okay.
like.
Any resolutions whatsoever.
I see. So I'm speaking in favor of the resolution to support the Sinatra Drive project. The Fund for Better Waterfront has been actively involved with this project for the past year. I think a contract was given out a year ago, December, and the work began in February of 2022. We had a number of occasions where we were able to meet with the Sinatra Drive team, and I'd like to thank Director Sharp and Director Gonzalez and City Engineer Olga Garcia. I think we had a lot of very productive discussions. The Sinatra Drive project, of course, we've been waiting for years for this thing to happen because the Central Waterfront has been long neglected. It's rather sad to walk down the Central Waterfront. You see the lack of trees, you see the speeding traffic. It's been very badly in need of this, finishing this project. So we'll get the protected bikeway connecting from the South Waterfront at 4th Street all the way up to Maxwell Place Park. And one of the things that we really pushed for was the landscape design that made sense, because this is what will help tie all the different parts of the waterfront together. And the South Waterfront really is a great example of what the rest of the waterfront could look like. And so continuing the rows of trees was very important to us. We, in fact, hired a landscape architect to help us, and that was Stephen Lederick of Arnold Associates. And he was the project manager for the landscape plan for the South Waterfront. So, and he was great. He was really great. He also came up with the specs for how the trees should be planted, proper soil volumes, the need for porous pavement so that air can get to the roots. And we're still having those discussions with the Sinatra Drive team, and I think they promised me that we'd be able to work all those unresolved issues out. So I just wanted to say that this is going to be a great project for Hoboken. I think a lot of people, it was not on their radar, but we've been paying close attention, and it's just going to make such a dramatic difference in the central part of the waterfront. 4th to 11th is going to be transformed in a very significant way. So thank you very much.
Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, do what's right, Jimmy.
Patricia Waiters.
Municipality, too many years. Please.
We're not going to let you speak.
Pat Waiters, Patricia Waiters?
She left the room. Mike, I swear to
Welcome
God,
up.
with every ounce of being in me, stop playing so much, Mike. And you know I respect you. Don't do that, Mike, because people watching this. And I don't want people to get the wrong concept. You know that.
Hey, you got to wait your turn.
No, I didn't, but that's...
I'm only kidding.
That's ridiculous.
For the people that's watching, Pat Waiters. No, but Mike, what I'm trying to say to you, I marked all of these resolutions. I was first. And I even asked, where's Jason? I just asked Jason, how did they cut Paul in front of me? He said,
he's right in the back of the room.
Jason, he said Paul called in, right? And then I was right under you, Paul. But to do that, that's embarrassing. And I'm upset a little bit because now you made me lose my chain of thought. But just for people that's watching this is every resolution I marked that I wanted to talk on. It's too many to put on that paper. I'm looking right at me, number 2. But don't do that because I don't want to give people the wrong impression. I'm already being approached in the street like, oh, Pat, I'm not the one. I'm not racist. I'm this and that. I love all you guys. Don't take that away from me. I've been here over 30 years, coming to these meetings, and it ain't about it's not me. The first thing out of my council president's mouth was, I don't want to be a part of that. I have nothing to do with that. Yes, you do. You're the council president. So respect everybody that come up to this microphone, regardless to who they are and what nationality they are. Respect us. For me to be skipped and then come and see my papers put to the side, that's not giving people that's watching this a good look. It's not. And thank God we got people. We got people like Michael Russo that understand me. Don't do that. I'm upset.
Patricia, that was my fault.
All right, Jimmy, and stop playing place to blame. If I hit you in the back of your neck, okay, let me go anyway. I just want to know about, and this is they all skipped me. B535. You skipped it. Oh, Doyle with the recreation fees. Are you going to start charging us to use the parks? B535.
No,
That's
it's
a
giving
fee
the
for-
opportunity to have.
Park for your own personal family use, there might be fees. Yes, not to, you don't have to pay to go to the park.
No, that's what I'm saying. For like when we do the barbecue and picnics or something and raising the blooms, it says, wait, I know I ain't reading.
Ms. Waiters, it's giving the opportunity that you may have more than one reservation per year. So originally, when this was passed at the end of last year, there was a concern for certain blocks in particular that wanted to have multiple parties over the course of the year. It's allowing that you may apply for more than one permit. That's the change included.
But do I have to get, you saying I have to go buy it from City Hall in order to use it? No, right? If I just,
This is for a specific process around permitting for block parties.
Columbus Park for the county?
Columbus Park is county.
So that's not y'all?
That's not us.
All right. The same thing with the baseball, E6, competitive baseball, whatever, for program, for recreation. We have to pay. I'm just asking because I know a lot of kids that.
That program is, if you are a free and reduced lunch family, you do not have to pay for the program.
And the Jubilee, E7, didn't we just lease the Jubilee, sold it or whatever? Do we have to, I see they asked for an increased amount for the heat and the engineer and air conditioner. I thought
Repairs.
somebody else owned the Jubilee.
The city owns the Jubilee Center. This is for repairs to be made to the building.
Oh, okay, so are we responsible for that or the new owners?
We own the building.
Oh, we still own it? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. So how did the Board of Education didn't buy it?
They lease it from the city.
Okay, thank you. See, it's helpful. I wanted to know these answers. Thank you so much. In the hot bus. Wait, one more real quick. Oh, resolution appointing Deborah, I can't even pronounce her last name, for the rent control. Could we consider Cheryl Fowler? That was a position open. I'm quite sure she's still interested.
These nominations are made by the mayor with the advice and consent of the council.
Could we make a nomination that the mayor start coming to meetings so I can ask him?
I can't answer that.
Yes? No? How can I suggest that?
Mayor, could you start coming to the meetings?
Thank you, Mayor Russo. So how can I start considering Cheryl Fowler?
How are we on time?
Was this a position open? I'm serious. It says for the.
They are appointed by the mayor, and then this council votes on
So could she
that.
apply? What does she do?
Of course she could apply, absolutely.
Okay, that's it.
She did apply.
She did? And y'all ain't pick her?
It is a mayoral appointment.
All right, thank
you. And then you wonder why I break your chops.
Manuel Rivera Soler.
I just had vision of water spilling
That
on the
it?
computer.
That's it.
It's not good. I feel like.
It's not.
Yeah.
Manny.
Manny, would you call?
Man, he was called up.
Oh, he was,
Yes, I called him.
Manuel Rivera Soler, 529 Park Avenue. Good evening, Council President, Council. I know that everybody's punchy, so I will, in lieu of time, not go with my original consent agenda. I would just ask 2 questions, and it's on. Now I'm going to lose it. Watch. It is. I'm going to start with first reading. It's the bond for the water the water mains. I think this is too high. I'm lifting my neck. Can somebody lower it just a bit? As well as I would like also on, oh God, I lost it. Here we go. On finance, here we go. Now we're in motion. On finance, F1, I would like to know if F1, this resolution, this is not a bond. We're not bonding anything in this resolution. Are we, or rather the council, the administration, is this for the disbursement of how this bond is going to be used? Is this what this is about? Because it is pretty the high amount, and I don't understand. It's talking about the International Infrastructure Bank or New Jersey Infrastructure Bank. Members of the public would like to know, or if you can help us out in regards to this information, or if I'm correct in what I read. If not, I really have to go back to take another course and try to read these packets. And by the way, for the record, 933 pages. Those are my questions, Council President. Thank you.
Ordinance number 4 on for first reading is a bond to repair the water main on Park Avenue from 2nd to 8th. And you may be familiar that there were a couple of breaks there earlier this year. So it is to contract to do those repairs. And Director Freeman, do you want to address the other item on F1?
It's the iBank. It's for Southwest Park. It's the way in which we're.
I can't see.
Yes, we already have the money. This is just how we're financing the iBank, which is the state, very beneficial to us funding. It's for Southwest Park work.
Okay, so then, pardon me for asking another question. It's not that we're saying we're using the money for something. It's just the bank.
Correct.
Okay, I knew I was reading it a little funny. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thanks, Bernie.
Thank you. I believe there are no more members of the public signed up to speak on resolutions.
Motion to close.
Public portion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Council members on consent. Sure, I'll make sure that you speak at the end. I have you, no problem. Council members on consent, anything that you wish to pull?
I have a couple questions on claims,
Claims?
and then
T2 and E2.
E2.
I feel like.
That's it.
CL2, Council President.
Just 1 second, CL2,
T2 and E2.
T2. And I heard an E2
Yep.
for Councilman Giatino, is that yours?
please.
Okay. Oh, E2, I have
two
for Tiffany as
K.
well, okay. Okay, so off of consent, claims, E2,
EL2.
CL2,
T2.
and T2. That's it?
Two.
Okay. Mr. Farina on consent.
Excuse me. Mr. Cohen,
Aye.
Mr. Fusco,
Yeah.
Mr. Doyle,
Abstain on CL3 and I on the rest.
Ms. Fisher,
Same as Jim. Abstain on CL3 and yes on the rest.
What is CL3?
Giatino,
Rent control.
Oh.
Rent control appointment.
Thank you. I was like, minutes? Why is everyone doing that? Is it my turn to vote?
yes.
Yes.
Mr. G.
I am a no on CL3, yes on everything else.
Mr. Quintero,
Aye.
Mr. Ramos,
No on CL3, aye on the remaining items.
Mr. Russo,
Aye.
President Jabour.
Yes, and abstain on CL3.
2-2.
Ms. Fisher on claims.
What does that do for CL3 then?
Doesn't, no.
It's a tie. 2-2-3.
I have 2 no, 3 abstain.
2 no, 3 abstain, the rest are yes.
So it passes.
Passes.
Councilman Fisher on claims.
Yeah. Just one, Jerry.
What's the runner?
One I'm just abstaining on, but I have a specific question on the other. I'm abstaining on 22. No, 22-02736. That's Cravatin. Okay. And then the question is the Alden Recreation Transportation for 21,900. It's
Under what header?
well, I don't have it in front of me, but it's basically 21,900, and it says recreation transportation. I was just curious what it was for.
Hold on.
You look for 21,900.
It's 423. Yeah.
Anyone else?
He's just getting really quick.
I will get back to you to confirm. I believe this is related to our cheerleading program, and they traveled to a number of different tournaments that were covered by busing for
Okay.
the city.
No claims.
Do we, just on that note, which by the way, I think it's great, and I know they're successful, but do we provide like busing for any of our
It's an
other?
ongoing discussion where some of those, the way we've done things in the past, I think is going to shift a
Change?
bit.
Okay, great. That's it. Thanks.
Mr. Freena on claims.
Vote on claims? Or we don't need-
Vote on claims?
It was pulled, so we need to vote on it.
I didn't get it. I was asking Jimmy to call the vote on claims.
Yes.
Which one we,
Vote on claims.
Vote on claims.
on the,
Claims were pulled
Because
from
we pulled
consent.
on the claims, Mr. Cohen,
Aye.
Mr. Fusco,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle,
Aye.
Fisher,
Yes, except 22-02736. I abstain.
Giantino,
Yes.
Mr. Quintero,
Aye.
excuse me, Mr. Ramos,
Aye.
Mr. Russo,
Aye.
President Jabour.
Yes. E2, Councilman Fisher.
Yeah, so I just want to, we had a conversation. This is for the,
Design council.
yeah, this is for the design contract for the architect. We had actually a pretty, and it's $1.174 million. It is a big number. We had a really robust conversation about this in the Environmental Services Subcommittee. And so I just want, and I'm comfortable with it. And the reason why I'm comfortable with it, first of all, because unlike some others where we've just given very large contracts away, this one we actually bid out. There were 17 bidders. And it's also a not to exceed contract. We're not writing a check and handing this architect a $1.17 million check. There's so many phases, and we pay them as we go. So what I would say is we want to start the process. We want to start designing the park. There are parts of it we are, notwithstanding two of us voted no, the lease is signed. There are parts, a small part of the park we're going to actually be able to use. And so starting this process and getting input from the public, we'll start spending a little money, but we're going to be doing it over the same period of time that we're going to be watching New York Waterway and what's happening in Weehawken, and we always have the ability to change paths. And I'm okay with that. So I just wanted the public to know that we are not just handing $1.174 million. This is a not to exceed, and we'll spend it over the next few years. So I'm okay with it.
Councilman Giantino, I believe you also wanted to comment on this.
Yes. I actually am okay with this too, because being that we own Union Dry Dock and we are designing it, gives us the ability to design the portion we will not be leasing to New York Waterway. Thank you.
Council members, any other comments? Mr. Freena, call the vote on E2.
Mr. Cohen,
Aye.
Mr. Fusco, Mr. Doyle,
Aye.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Giantino,
Yes.
Mr. Quintero,
Aye.
Mr. Ramos,
Aye.
Mr. Russo,
Aye.
President Jabour.
Yes.
CO2.
T2, I believe. Yes. Council Vice President, I believe you pulled T2.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment when I spoke earlier about Union Dry Dock, and how we don't make decisions in a vacuum. This is one of those things, right? This is one of the factors that come into play. So we don't exercise a contract with Union Dry Dock. We go to court. We have to fight that thing out. What happens here, right? So some of the people who are against us exercising that contract with Union Dry Dock, with New York Waterway, are very supportive of this, including some council members that are sitting here tonight. So nothing is in a vacuum. It all works hand in hand. And I just wanted to make that point because who knows what happens with this if, in fact, we didn't vote to pass that contract. So that's all I had.
Council President?
Councilman
I also
Giardino?
pulled this. If we didn't own Union Dry Dock already, we wouldn't be able to use the 25 feet into Union Dry Dock, which is allowing us to do this. So regardless of how you voted on the lease tonight, we own Union Dry Dock, so we could use that property.
Any other council members?
C2, correct?
Yeah.
T2.
Yeah,
Sure, Councilman.
Thank you, Council President. We've been discussing this, pretty much for the past year. I want to say on the Transportation Committee. So it's finally nice to see it come to fruition tonight after a number of meetings, a number of discussions that we had, every 2 weeks. This came up pretty consistently. And we had about 3 meetings separately where this was the only topic where we discussed. And those meetings weren't like 10-minute meetings or, an hour, hour and a half, 2-hour meetings. So it was really great to get in depth with all of that and see it come to fruition. Hopefully it's going to be a beautiful plan that all of us get to enjoy.
And Council President, I do want to especially thank Director Sharp and our city engineer, Olga Garcia, for putting so much time and making sure that all the council people were aware of what was going on. So thank you for that.
Casey, right? Casey's involved too, right? Casey.
Any other council members?
Yep, just quickly.
Councilman Fisher?
Director Sharp called me today, and I said, you don't have to walk me through it. I'm not going to oppose it. And he's like, but there's one thing I want to tell you. We're adding 66 spaces back, which has been important. Councilman Cohen mentioned it earlier today, and I do think the fact that we now own Union Dry Dock and we get to expand the walkway and be able to use more of it, I think is a win-win, and we love win-win situations. So I really appreciate that, and I think the residents of the area in particular are going to really appreciate it. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, just for the record, Mr. Sharp, Director Sharp, that's why I blew you a kiss earlier tonight. Okay?
I actually thought you were going to say, just for the record, we own Union Dry Dock.
I think 6 times is enough.
If I could add one
Just
point.
for the record.
Sure, Councilman Quintero.
I will not be discussing the ownership of Union Dry Dock. I just want to say this is an example of the administration and the city as a whole keeping their eye on the ball and positioning itself to make positive changes if and when they present themselves. So the ultimate vision is a contiguous waterfront, beautiful green space going north to south, south to north, whichever direction you're headed in. And that's frankly not what we have today. Somebody mentioned that, when you traverse that section of town right now, it's sad, and it is. And it shouldn't be like that, and it won't be like that in the near future. Again, thanks to the efforts of the folks that were mentioned before, in particular in the parking transportation division and the city engineer. Had we not positioned ourselves when the Union Dry Dock opportunity came up, we wouldn't have been able to make the amendments to add the extra trees and add the extra parking. So again, the whole point of this and what we always strive to is to make sure that we put ourselves in a position to take those opportunities if and when they present themselves. So I'm excited for this, and we'll be voting yes.
Councilman Cohen?
So I also want to thank, I think there were over 1,700 people who answered the survey with respect to this. That's a lot of participation from the general public. It's great that we're able to do this. It's great that we own it. It's great that we know what the price of it will be. And it's also great that we've eliminated a lot of risk this evening by moving forward with respect to, as Councilman Russo said, these things are all interconnected. Can't do one without the other. So we've moved the city forward, and I think it's great that it seems like we're in unanimous support of what is a beautiful design which will transform Sinatra Drive. Thank you, Council President.
I'll just add my thanks, Director Sharp, to Olga Garcia, to the professionals with Kimley Horn. It's really come out to be a beautiful project, and I'm most excited about the true protected bike lane. And I know that was not without the advocacy of a number of different people in this community to ask for as part of this project. So with that, Mr. Frieden, call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco? Mr. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Giantino?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
President Jabour?
Yes. Sealed 2, Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Council President. This is a resolution expressing the City of Hoboken's support for the building service workers in Hoboken and Jersey City. Last year, I joined strikers in front of the North Constitution with respect to unfair labor practices. And then again in January, there were strikes both in Jersey City and in Hoboken. Part of this strike relates to alleged unfair labor practices, where it was identified that one of the workers there was looking to organize, which he has a legal right to do, and was retaliated against by being fired. So I was proud to work alongside 32BJ with respect to this to protect the rights of workers to unionize, for better living wages, and for better working wages for their families. So I just wanted to make a note of this and to share the city's support with the workers' right to unionize. Thank you, Council President.
Mr. Farina, call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco?
Yeah.
Mr. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Giantino?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
President Jabour?
Yes.
Introduction of ordinances and ordinance adopting the International Property Maintenance Code.
Council
Mr. Farina, call the vote.
Sorry. Can we have 1 second to find out what this is? All right, we can find out after. I looked through it. I couldn't figure out what it was.
I'll make sure to provide you that information.
All right.
Mr. Farina?
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco?
Yeah.
Mr. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Giantino?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos? Mr. Russo?
Aye.
President Jabour?
Yes.
Introduction and ordinance amending Chapter 190-6.1 entitled Restricted Parking for Police Vehicles, Fire Vehicles, Official Business to relocate space near Stevens Park and add a space near 7th and Jackson Park.
Mr. Farina, call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco? Mr. Doyle?
Aye.
Fisher?
Yes.
Giantino?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
President Jabour?
Yes.
Ordinance for introduction, bond ordinance authorizing the rehabilitation and/or replacement of various water mains in the city of Hoboken, County of Hudson, New Jersey, appropriating a sum of $4 million, therefore authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds or bond anticipation notes for the city of Hoboken, County of Hudson, New Jersey, in the aggregate principal amount of $4 million, making certain determinations and covenants and authorizing certain related actions connected with the foregoing.
Council President, a quick question. This is, just to clarify, a lot of members of the public have asked this question. This is only for water mains, right? From Park
Correct.
County,
Water mains only.
That's all it is, folks. Water mains.
Water mains.
Thank you.
Mr. Farina, call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco? Mr. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Giantino?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
President Jabour?
Yes.
Ordinance for introduction, amending redevelopment plan for Newman Leathers Rehabilitation Area.
Mr. Farina, call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
DeFusco? Mr. Doyle?
No.
Ms. Fisher?
No. No.
Mr. Giantino?
No.
Mr. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Ramos?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
President Jabour?
Yes. CD 9, referring.
Public portion?
Nope, nice, CD 9. We now have to do CD 9.
Oh, I'm
To
sorry.
the planning board.
CD9, resolution of the City of Hoboken referring the ordinance amended redevelopment plan for Newman Leathers Rehabilitation Area, City of Hoboken, the Planning Board for review and report pursuant to local redevelopment and housing law NJSA 40A:12A-7.
Mr. Farina, call the vote.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
Fusco.
Yes.
Mr. Doyle.
Aye.
Ms. Fisher.
Yes.
Giantino.
Yes.
Mr. Quintero.
Aye.
Mr. Ramos.
Aye.
Mr. Russo.
Aye.
President Jabour.
Yes. And Mr. Farina, we have two items under new business, CC2 and CC3. For the benefit of the public, one of the resolutions is authorizing that we can vote on it on an emergency basis, and CC3 is a settlement agreement that was discussed in closed session, which is why it was added late after the agenda was published, which is why it's being considered as an emergent issue. So, Mr. Farina, on CC2 and CC3.
Together?
Mr. Quintero, Mr. Cohen, I'm sorry.
This is for CC2 and CC3.
Together.
Yes.
I feel like I've been.
Yes and yes.
Fusco.
Yes.
Mr. Doyle.
Yes.
Fisher.
Abstain.
Yes, you didn't say my name, though. You
Oh,
just
I'm
looked
sorry.
at me.
Giantino.
Yes.
Mr. Quintero.
Aye.
Mr. Ramos.
Aye.
Mr. Russo.
Aye.
President Jabour.
Yes. Public portion.
Okay. See if we get this one. James Delas Santor.
Wait.
All right, hi everyone here. So the reason why I'm here is to speak about something interesting, something new, something fun that people love and enjoy. But at the same time, I would like to request a permit for this. So this is about the 360 photo booth. I think one of you may know what is. I will show you pictures. So the 360 photo booth is a photography equipment that you place on the ground and people stand on it. Then this spin around the people recording 360 videos. So this equipment can be used for private events, and it may be a little bit expensive, but these are, this may be a little expensive, but the reason why I'm doing this is because I would like to use this on the public space and give the chance to the people that may not have the money to pay this for the private event, give them the chance to get their video. So obviously, this is going to be like a little business, but at the same time, I will be promoting the city of Hoboken. They will be posting those videos on internet, any social media. So if you guys haven't seen, this is the 360 photo booth. This is the equipment that I'm saying, and what is those? So this is what is for. So basically, this is what I'm requesting. And the reason why I'm here is because this is something new, and they don't have permit for this anywhere. I've been doing this in Miami Beach. I've been doing this in Times Square, and I'm trying to do this right here because on the past I was living here in New Jersey, and I already know that this may be a good place, but they don't have permit for this in Miami Beach, in Times Square, anywhere, because this is something new. So that's why I'm here, and that's all the information that I have. Also, I use this for photography events. If you guys have an upcoming event or something, I'm here to cover that. Thank
Do you have a business card you could leave with us, and we'll make sure somebody follows up with you with the information?
They will give me my business card today. So
Okay. We'll leave your contact
they are not
information with
ready yet.
the clerk's office, and we'll make sure to follow up with you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Director?
Patricia Waiters.
Pat waiters. And Mike, meet me outside, because I'm going to show you all of these texts, and they come in and on my phone for you. I'm serious. Stop laughing. You know Joe Pachello Joe?
Yeah.
And you're building all of them. But anyway, I'm here to speak about this. a few other people that I deal with in the city confronted me this week, but I've been going through something I don't even want to discuss with tonight about what I'm going to do with the Board of Ed. But when I come up to this microphone and when I talk about anything with respect to any type, and I'm not accusing y'all, so please get this straight, because I'm reading these texts and they're real disturbing. And when I leave the meeting and go home and go on Twitter and see the comments people make, they want us to fight. They want to divide us. And I'm only asking y'all for these 3 things tonight. Because see, we ain't going to feed into the hype, Mike, you know that. Division between our communities, feeling, and these just little concerns people just threw out to me, feeling uncomfortable in our skin, continue to speak and be a voice for us, Patricia, don't give up. Don't entertain others when they want to use racism as personal gain, elections, votes, or rewards. You the type that don't acute, something, I guess they meant riots. You prevent riots from coming in our city between special interests and sides. Old Hoboken versus new must stop. There's no mayor and council clique majority versus public residents and non-public residents. Well, anyway, I'm saying this to say this. In this town since the 60s, born and raised, people do hold stuff in their mind and have a different mindset than I hope could change, because it can change, especially the people that just recently moved here 10 or 20 years ago. Back in the days, we all ate. That's an old saying, Mike, you can explain to them later, but we all ate. I mean, we all took care of each other. If I had a headache, you had a headache, or you was giving me 2 aspirins to stop the headache. We was like a family for real. So you may see a different side of me not getting emotional, but I get emotional. When 67 people get laid off that worked in City Hall for 30 years, and I know it's all politically motivated, even though y'all can't stand when people get to this microphone and say it's politics, it's politics. I will respect the man and say, Patricia, you're right. That's how I got my job. That's how I got my children's job. That's how I got my ancestors, the nieces, the nephews. And it's politics. It's been going on for years. But to deny it, it looks ugly. But it's gotten to the point where all of these jobs, when people come in, somebody that worked 30 years to cut their TV on and see somebody making $111,000, $80,000 or whatever, but we had a layoff. And we not addressing it. This is situations that have affected people's quality of life, got people mad at each other, fighting each other all the time. We can't even go in the store and say good morning. And don't look like this is not going to continue if somebody don't address it. I told y'all years and years and years, racism could be a very uncomfortable topic, but now that it's on a worldwide, nationwide, you should at least want to address it and unpack it and unleash it. It's a good feeling when you let it go. Instead of standing there saying, well, it don't exist, and trying to be mean and be my enemy and come at me instead of work with me. It's not going to work. I'm not going nowhere. So I'm going to share this briefly so I can wrap it up because I don't want to lose focus. My union, okay, tried to remove me as the council president, as my union president. You know why? Because I was told I see too much. I won't be obedient. I don't listen. But you know who's going to hurt? When y'all go out to hurt people, revenge, the good people that I got to fight for. Not the politically appointed people that feel like they don't need the union because they have Tim Callaghy, which was also appointed. So when our town fighting and got all of this going on and this type of political garbage and dirt, I'm asking y'all to stop it. And it's going to get worse because y'all seats is up. That's scary. 6 seats is up. I've been telling you, Mr. Cohen, about, I know it's a county road. A car was doing 100 the other day, and I almost seen a senior citizen get killed. But you worried about going to give them roses and have them divided in bingo, fighting over hamburgers. Matt's grandmother, y'all all know for years that lady been involved helping everybody. You went in and divided the building. And you don't care about their quality of life. You can't do that. It's bigger than you getting a vote. Most of them ladies, 80 and 90 years old, you don't even know if they're going to be here to see you win or lose. Start thinking about people's quality of life. Speed bumps. You put speed bumps, it's right in Rite Aids and Walgreens across the street. They could have put them same speed bumps in front of Fox Hill. And this is what I'm telling you, by giving people material things, that's not everlasting. These things that's haunting Old Hoboken is everlasting. It's in our mind, it's in our heart. We want it to stop. I'm not going to start no riot. I'm not letting people do that in my community. I want us to work together. I'm not going to quit either because we did nothing wrong but opened up our hearts and minds when you guys moved here 20 or 30 years ago. And we've been here for centuries.
Ms. Waiters, if you could just wrap up your comments, please.
I'm wrapping it up saying
Thank you
this.
very much.
All our lives matter, especially my senior citizens. When I get a call from 83 senior citizens worried about crying and upset because they don't have Leo Pellegrini anymore, then that means we at war. I'm asking you guys, please, let's do this as a group effort, okay? I'm willing to meet with you again, Ravi. I've been calling them all week.
Ms. Waiters, if you
Thank
could just wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm finished.
Thank you very
Manuel
much.
Rivera, Solod.
Thank you, Council President Manuel Rivera Soler. I see Council Vice President likes pranking people here with the mic. I know he has the controls. Well, yeah, sure. Anyway, Council President, I had a long synopsis here to say to you all, but I'm changing it up today like I did in consent agenda, just because I want to keep things fresh and I don't want to overstay my welcome. But I will say this, that we must always aspire to have representatives that listen to the people, that are respectful to the people, and in some cases, sometimes come down to the level of the people. So with that have been said, I would like to thank today most members of the council when asked how to vote, to express themselves on their votes, why yes and why no. You did, and that is communication. That is what we need more of. That is what the intention of people who come here to ask you questions is, so that we can get that communication for all of us. Whether you voted for something and then you voted for something in the positive elsewhere, that's good, but you explained your vote, which is important, because that way I know that you were working for the people in one hand, thinking your next move, and that is important. Again, it's important to continue to have a dialogue with the people. Transparency is everything. Now, when other municipalities and other places, as were mentioned today, that have a stranglehold on their cities, that is not fair. That is not democracy. So when other people come down the pike asking you to speak to them, please have the courtesy, as you always have, to answer their questions in this forum and when they see you in private, which most of the time that's how it occurs. So I thank you. I appreciate the time. And I say once again, and I say it with my heart, God bless you and God bless Hoboken. Thank you.
Mary Andrika.
Mary Andrika, 159 9th Street. I'm here going to talk about that ordinance that passed 2 weeks ago on the rent control, various changes to the definitions and the wording. I'm speaking before Ron, so I really don't know what he's going to say, and it was very stressful for me last week, so I don't know what's going on with that. But the fact that you had a lot of people here that wanted to table it, and I hope that somewhere soon down the road that amendments will be made that might be accepted by Ron or Cheryl that they have made. I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone, and the fact that I am concerned about the wording. I do know that, Emily, you had answered Eileen Lynch's question because she sent me the email. I've saved that email and going to print it out, because if I need proof, and I don't know how much power you have over a law or what someone says in life, how strong that will hold. Like I said, it's a big concern because I think the rent control office has operated pretty much laissez-faire, whatever they wanted to do or whatever anyone was willing to do, and a lot of the rules weren't adhered to. So a lot of problems have come about, and that's made landlords unhappy as well as tenants. And then you have a faction like the farmers against the ranchers, and which has been the way it's always been. since I've lived in this town, and it's unfortunate. I don't know how many all of you work together on this. There's such a division on this council, which is sad to say, because even the renters and the landlords can come together, as Ron Simoncini did with Cheryl. I think that that's a good thing. You don't always have to agree, and just like with Union Dry Dock, you have to make concessions. I must applaud Jim Doyle and sorry, I have a headache. Russo and Emily, even Phil and Joe, that you actually were speaking the truth. Because I read all the stuff, so I don't always disagree, and I'm not just being an adversary. You have to make decisions. But I think in the case with the rent control, there were so many issues, and the wording is a tricky thing. And as lawyers, it's tricky because you be good lawyers or bad lawyers just because something's written a certain way, and it will go that way. So I just hope that you're open-minded to understand. I think you said give it 10 months. I don't know. A lot can go on. Nobody knows. One day you woke up and you're told not to go into your job because of a pandemic. Everything is static. I mean, it's not static. It just changes constantly, and there's nothing you can do about it, but have to go with the flow. So I'm just letting you know that. The other thing I wanted to mention was I had never seen someone next to that charger right next to the old bank, which is the Walgreens now, because I always see their cars with the electric thing inside it. I don't know the correct terminology. And one time recently I saw a man who was standing out there charging up, and I finally could talk to somebody who had an electric vehicle and ask him about it. And he told me something shocking. Okay, there's 3 levels of chargers, and that charger charges for 1 hour for only 7 miles. Yeah. That's insane. And if you people are going to approve other future chargers, which I'm actually against electric cars. I think it's an incredible waste of. I can go in that another time, but I think you ought to not have something that's charging for an hour for 7 miles. You're wasting people's time. And he uses a supercharger where he works, so that's important. And lastly, in 1.5 months, the lanternflies are returning. I would hope you will all be proactive because it's going to be, I'm going to not exaggerate, 20 times as worse than last year. Thank you.
Ron Simoncini.
Good evening. Thank you, Jerry. I'll be quick. I appreciate Mary referencing the fact that there was a coming together moment for landlords and tenants that this council was not able to respect in the way that we had hoped. And I think that, a lot of the reaction that Cheryl and I had maybe didn't give enough credit to the idea that you guys had worked on something for a while. And we weren't able to get you our negotiated agreement until just before the council meeting, so you weren't able to review it. It's not my role to give anybody a pass. Obviously, you're the elected officials, and I think that our reaction didn't quite absorb as much of that as it might have. However, in the intervening days since then, several of the council people who supported a tabling of the amendments that you passed in order to review our document have continued to work on this to our great appreciation. And we've heard new voices come to the table who said, I was able to review what you guys wrote, and I don't see why we wouldn't do it. Does that mean you will do it? I'm not sure. I don't think that it's something to take lightly, that you have been advised by formerly warring groups that what you did was not in our best interest, either side. I would be massively disappointed if the moment didn't come that you were able to actually debate what it was that we had as differences between what we wanted to do and what you did. And I think that there'll be permutations of that later if it's not something that we can resolve in the, I think, very civil way that Cheryl and I approached it. And that, as you can see, landlords and tenants certainly have been able to agree on just practical language and process adjustments that we've experienced for 15 years. And that some of the people who voted on this are voting on it in a way that's very conjecture oriented and very conceptually oriented. When the rubber meets the road, I think that people like Cheryl and I are going to be very practical. We have ideological battles, we have policy battles, but as far as implementation is concerned, I trust the people that I worked with on the council and from the tenancy to have been open-minded and egalitarian. And I would hope that this council would be able to say, okay, now we've had weeks to review what those two people came to us with, and can we really just put aside whatever factional issues there are and say maybe the insights that they brought to the table deserve a hearing? Thank you.
Mr. Simoncini, as a point of information, the amendments that you're speaking of were referred to the Community Development Subcommittee. They did not have an opportunity to meet to have that discussion before this meeting, but I understand that meeting is next week. So in terms of how items kind of come before the council, you're correct in pointing out that there was a number of months leading up to of subcommittee meetings and different stakeholder meetings that took place, and that will be considered by the subcommittee as part of their process as well. Sure.
Charles Kutz.
How's it going? Charles Katz, Hoboken. It's great weather today, wasn't it? Oh, can you hear me? Sorry. It's great weather today, wasn't it? I mean, it was a great day to play baseball and softball outside. I mean, I was walking around, I saw kids in parks. I saw people playing baseball at the Little League field. I saw a lot of stuff. And then I drove by Mama Johnson Field, and I saw that the field was under lock and key. And as I've written emails to multiple council members, that's a violation of the shared service agreement. And, Councilman Ramos, you talked yesterday, you passed that bill 2 weeks ago about how you're going to put bathrooms and announcing equipment at the softball field in order to give equity. Well, it's hard for the girls to feel like there's equity when they walk by the field that's supposed to be their home softball field, and it's always under lock and key. It's, and I just, I wanted to bring that up because today was like the perfect day to bring it up, looking at how everything was outside. I've been mentioning this a bunch. I'd really hope that you guys could kind of do something to kind of resolve that. It really, there should be no fields in Hoboken that are locked. All the other parks in town are open 24/7. You can go on them, and this one field, which is the home of the softball program, is under lock and key for the majority of it. I've been driving by all winter long. It's been a very nice winter. In fact, you could go and play outside, and that field it's unfair to the residents of the city that it's always locked. I mean, the last thing I want to say is there's a YouTube video online where Mike Turner and Stu Tricelli, they were talking about how vibrant and how accessible that field was, 20, 30 years ago. And now you go by it and everyone just assumes it's always locked. And I just don't think that's really fair to the citizens of the town. And I'd really like if you guys could kind of, speak to either the HHA or the rec department to make sure that that field stays open, at least when, according to the shared service agreement, it should be open. Thank you very much. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Thank you, Mr. Katz. And I know actually that's something that has been a subject of discussion. And I think I'm trying to remember which subcommittee we were in, Councilman Ramos. I'm looking at you because I know you were part of the discussion to ensure that that field would be open. The city is actually taking a more active role in terms of the management and oversight with that field, partly from a staffing perspective, so that we can make it possible to open that field more freely. And Councilman Ramos, I don't mean to steal if you want to add anything.
Myself, Director Gonzalez, Jessica, right? Did I say her name correctly? Jessica? We met with Director Recco and try and reopen the shared service agreement to clarify the exact time. Because right now that's a big concern for the Hoboken Housing Authority. Who's in charge of maintaining the facility? Because they don't have the manpower or the funds to maintain it 24/7. And we believe we do. So that's what we're going to work on right now with them. Hopefully within the next month or to 5 weeks, we'll have something more lock and key where it can be open 24/7.
Well, that's great to hear.
Well, not 24/7, but locked in the evening as well. So we are working to try and make that happen.
Council Vice President?
Yeah, and just to add and confirm that from the Hoboken Housing Authority's perspective as well, I serve as a commissioner there. It's been a conversation, as you know, we've been having for a while, and we've been trying to figure out how we're going to actually staff it, if in fact that's the housing authority's responsibility, and how we're going to afford to staff it, right? So I think those are the discussions that are happening right now between the City of Hoboken and the Housing Authority, and I'm very hopeful that in the very near future we'll figure it out.
And I think long-term, we're discussing the city. Right now, the housing authority will be opening and closing, but I think the city is going to take that responsibility, opening, closing, and maintaining.
Correct.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all you guys do.
Thanks.
Thanks, Charlie.
Roberto Verthurley.
I just had a couple of questions. When the city says that they cannot enforce any noise regulation, does that prevent us as residents from trying to enforce noise regulations? That's one of the questions. The second question was, does Hoboken have an ordinance of how long the ferry can run its engines while at the stationed at the facility? And I understand that most of the activities are going to be at night, but that's when most of the people are trying to sleep, and noise is a factor. So can I get an answer to those two things? I did see that that they're not going to use any sort of storage, but that will have the counter issue that will mean more trucks and more traffic into that area. But can I get on the record an interpretation of what 2.6 does to the residents of Hoboken vis-a-vis noise?
Council President?
And just to clarify, you made an assertion at the beginning of your comment, and I'm not sure. You said that we don't. I'm not sure what you were referring to.
According to the
Oh, within the lease. That's
Clearly, the city of Hoboken can have
Right.
noise ordinances and enforce them, and indeed we do. But you're citing to this section, and in the section, there is a statement that says the operations of as operated as it's the intended use, the noises that are generated in that operation cannot be cited as noise violation.
by the landlord only or by everybody? Because it says the landlord, so I just wanted to know whether we can call the police or somebody and say, geez, it's on all night.
As a general matter, anyone can call Hoboken Police Department dispatch to report a complaint with respect to noise.
But I don't think this, I think
slightly different.
the city, they can't do anything. My guess is the city police fall under landlord, the city of Hoboken, and probably won't be able to issue any type of violations. What the lease, to Councilman Doyle's point, the lease says, basically we have to accept the noise of their operations as just being acceptable, period. And not only that, the lease also says that we have to change, our ordinance have to be effectively changed and updated to accommodate all of their operations. So whether or not we have something that limits their ability to, turn their engines on, which I don't believe that we do. Like in the water, I don't believe that we do. According to this lease, we would actually have to change our ordinances to accommodate their operations.
We have to change the law that says they can leave their engines running. We don't have any law that dictates how long an
The lease says that our ordinances have to be amended. We agree to amend our ordinances to accommodate
the
their
lease.
operations, and nothing in our ordinances can be done to stop them from limit their operations. So if it is
as defined in the lease.
right, as defined in the lease.
Right.
Which is not as defined in the lease.
Very different.
It's not.
Which is very different from saying that the city of Hoboken has to go and amend ordinances in general, right? Number one, no lease, no legal action can bind a council to change laws in the city of Hoboken. I don't care what it says in the lease. That's just the reality of it, right? So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to noise in the city of Hoboken, forget about Union Dry Dock for 1 second. There has to be a sustained decibel level for a period of time. So years back, we had an issue with motorcycles coming through the city of Hoboken. And that happened on Washington Street. It happened years later on the waterfront. And those pipes were real loud. And they would be really loud as they passed by. But the reality was that no enforcement could have happened because it wasn't a sustained noise level in one place for a certain period of time. So enforcing noise violations is a difficult thing in general terms. It has nothing to do with Union Dry Dock. It has to do with pretty much all noise level, unless it's a sustained noise in one location. So that's the other side of how we enforce noise issues in the city of Hoboken. So I tend to disagree with Councilwoman's assessment of what that lease says. Again, I'm not the attorney, but the attorneys worked long hours on this lease. And I know every one of them on not only the city side, but but New York Waterways side know that no lease could bind a future council or current council to change laws.
But there is another reason to prevent the running, and that's environmental. So is there a something that we can do to control? I mean, even in Port Authority, they're supposed to, the buses are only idling for 5 minutes because they're trying to control pollution. So how do we control pollution if they're going to be running their engines constantly?
It's a great question.
It's a mobile source under the Clean Air Act. I mean, I don't, you're trying to pack every possible problem that may result into a lease. I know my analogy earlier about, renting an apartment and killing your spouse. You don't put in the lease, thou shalt not kill. The environmental conditions, if the Clean Air Act, of the Federal Clean Air Act says you cannot run engines, buses for more than X minutes idling laws that they have, then they can't do it. But we don't have local laws that say how long you can park your car and leave it running, or motorcycles. Yeah, I mean, we don't regulate everything here. So
You do have laws about motorcycles.
Maybe you should, but the other thing, from the
emissions
point
under the Clean Air Act.
No,
is what
but
I'm-
idling.
the
you have laws.
has there been any conversations with the Coast Guard about enforcing the lease regulations?
They won't enforce our lease. This is a
Well,
lease
I mean,
between two parties.
Huh?
It's a lease between two parties.
Well, I mean, that they're doing what they said they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, and not other things.
So
And-
if we think, if the city, whoever thinks that they're doing something wrong, as Emily said, anyone can call and say, I think they're violating the Clean Air Act, the environmental law that's maybe relevant, or any of these things, unless I'm not sure. No, we haven't called up the Coast Guard and asked them when they will be enforcing the terms of our lease.
Whether they will be enforcing. And,
Well, that's
and there is no issue with odor. I mean, these are all things that, having been to planning board meetings for cannabis, we discussed them. And we discussed a lot of
they'll be coming
things.
to the planning board.
Huh?
Too. This facility operator will be coming to the planning board as well.
Okay, so they
And
haven't
there will
actually
be-
gone to the planning board or the zoning board, or just they're not even going through the zoning board?
They haven't.
But
They haven't yet.
the lease says the planning board will approve it.
No, it doesn't say that.
What does it say?
It says the administration will support
Does more
the
than that.
application before the planning board. It can't.
Mr.
write-
Frifley, do you have
yes,
any?
it does.
Let's come back. Your comment period is about up. Do you have any additional comments that you wish to make from your 5 minutes?
No, just those were my basic questions, and it looks like there is a lot of disagreement, so maybe these things should be discussed between all of you before we go ahead. I mean, these are not like, I mean, you're talking about putting it next to a park that includes a playground, okay?
Mr. Worthley,
So
thank you for...
if the playground becomes unusable, what's the point of having another park if you're right next to it? It's like
Thank you for your comments.
You don't put a park next to a 6-lane highway either, because there's too much noise, right? And you don't put a park next to the airport runway, you know, so.
Thank you, Mr. Worthley, for your comments.
Council President.
Council Vice President.
Just quickly, again, I just have to make this statement. Although some council members or members of the public may make statements and may feel one way or have an opinion about something, doesn't mean that this council and or the administration and the professionals didn't put countless hours into the things that come before us, whether it's this agreement or an ordinance or anything else. Those disagreements happen all the time. Doesn't mean that people didn't do their work. They're just disagreements. They're differing opinions on what that individual is reading. I absolutely disagree that any lease agreement can force a vote of independently chosen planning board members to vote one way and have that be legal. It is absolutely 100% illegal for anyone to force a member of the public who serves on a public body to vote one way. And anyone who insinuates that is absolutely wrong. End of statement.
I think we've had enough discussion on the lease for this evening. We're going to move to new business. Councilman Fisher, do you want to start?
There's books in this reality, though, too. This does happen.
You're going to do the...
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think the only thing I will say in new business, because I get to say whatever I want, is for clarity, what the lease says, it's okay, Mike. What the lease says is that effectively our ordinances have to be changed to accommodate their operations. Whether or not we actually have to do it or not comes down to, it does. See, it totally does.
No,
it just says we have to accommodate. But to Councilman Russo's point, it doesn't mean that we're going to sit up here and be forced to vote on ordinances. But it's a situation where if they do something that's inconsistent with our ordinances, we won't have the ability to, give them a violation or anything because it will be inconsistent with our lease agreement. So effectively, we won't be, if we don't change our ordinances, we'll be kind of forced to turn the other way. It's just the way it reads. The lease reads that we effectively are agreeing to accept their operations as they operate. And it says strongly that the city of Hoboken will work with the local planning board to see to it that all approvals are secured. It basically does. So it does though. It basically is like, we're going to work really hard to let them operate whatever way they want. That is the way the lease reads. And but to Councilman Russo's point, he is 100% right, which I don't say very often, that nothing can force us to actually change the law, like vote a certain way. We get to vote whatever way we want.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to let you know that I
appreciate you
100%
clarifying
support
that.
you.
Right, I would just point out that it's currently zoned industrial maritime.
Yeah.
This use is industrial maritime. So I don't think that we'll be having to change any laws to allow them to operate an industrial maritime operation on this property. So if the fear that we have to go change all our laws so that they can
So industrial maritime, just so you know, because they're allowed to do whatever they want in our zoning, industrial maritime allows for permanent refueling storage on site and allows for up to 2 stories and 35-foot structure on the site. And they're allowed to operate within our ordinances.
Yes, just to confuse matters more, the lease doesn't allow that, but the zoning code allows it, but since the lease prohibits it, they can't.
The lease does allow refueling.
It does.
Do council members have any other comments than revisiting the topic of the lease agreement?
I have nothing else. Thank you.
Councilman Doyle, you're all set?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay.
Yes.
Councilman Ramos.
No shame.
Thank you. Just a couple of announcements. March 2nd, at the Multi-Service Center, we'll be having the first public meeting with regards to the Multi-Service Center redesigns. That's March 2nd at 6 p.m. at the Multi-Service Center, and there'll be an announcement made shortly with that announcement. Then March 22nd at 221 Jackson Street, also at 6 p.m., will be the first Hoboken Housing Authority public meeting with regards to the Hoboken Housing Authority redevelopment process. And again, we have a tight window of 6 months to produce a product, to move that project forward. That's also very exciting. Next, I want to thank Dave Calamanari.
I always butcher that one.
Me too. Well, Dave. Want to thank Dave because and Director Gonzalez, because we were finally able to secure a vendor for the Southwest Park Farmers Market for this summer. So really appreciate of Stony Hill Farms for stepping up to the plate and helping us with the farmers market. And lastly, just want to discuss, Ron touched on a part of it earlier, as well as Mary, with the rent control compromise that I was able to mediate, I guess, and Councilman Giattino was able to mediate between Ron and Cheryl, the two organizations, Miles Square Taxpayer Association and Fair Share Housing Association. It was presented last Wednesday to the council president and council vice president, so hopefully it goes to committee next week, and it'll be up for a first reading and a discussion at the next council meeting. That's my goal. Hopefully it's the committee's goal, and we'll discuss those changes at that time. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you.
Yes. First on the lease.
Oh, God.
Just kidding.
Please don't.
Be unscrupulous.
Mary's gone, but I did want to address one point that she raised with respect to the chargers. Yes, we are putting in more chargers throughout the city. As you may remember, last year we came to an agreement with a company called Volta, who will be installing chargers at no cost, the infrastructure at no cost to the city. The chargers that go in commercial areas will, my understanding, be the high-powered chargers that get a meaningful charge in 15 minutes. I don't know exactly how that long is, but it's more than 7 miles in an hour, that's for sure. So we can look forward to receiving and working on those. The other bit is I had no intention of speaking on this subject, but I opened CNN and saw this. And while we were sitting here debating, leases and Newman Leathers and whether we want to, make a no stopping standing area bigger or smaller, there was another mass shooting. And this one was in El Paso Mall, 1 dead, 3 injured on top of the shooting from the other day. Interesting fact is the year 2023 is only 46 days old, yet we've had over 60 mass shootings in the United States. I'm not going to talk about gun control and that, 'cause there's folks on this dais who do far more work on that than I do. But I was thinking about, can it happen here? And I feel like in the city, we often feel like, oh, these other places are different. It can't happen in Hoboken. These are things that happen in Sandy Hook, in Parkland, Aurora, Las Vegas, Uvalde. But they can happen here. And we must remain vigilant. We must support those who protect us. That's our first responders, our police, fire, ambulance, corps, OEM. We got to be clear on the mission that we want for them so that they can execute, and we got to support them with all the resources they need. We've been having conversation over the past few days on amending our ordinances so that we can hire, lift the residency ordinance so we can, better hire and staff our police force. One of those things that we learned through the process is we're kind of capped on our women officers, not because of probably lack of applicants, but we don't have the facilities to house them. So we need to stop talking out of both sides of our mouths in the city and saying on the one hand, we support you, we love you, thank you for all the work, and then refusing to give them the tools and facilities that they need. So my commitment for the rest of this year, as it has been, is to continue to work with the Public Safety Director and the chiefs and everybody else on this dais to further that mission, to support these folks so that they can continue to keep us safe, because I have this dread that it's only a matter of time, and the only thing that fights that is our vigilance and our support. Thank you.
Thank you. Tomorrow night at the Multi, 6 p.m., Voters' Choice New Jersey and New Jersey Appleseed will be hosting Rank the Restaurants. I don't know if I said 6 p.m., but it's 6 p.m. It's a super fun event. I went to the one in Jersey City. I want to thank Director Gonzalez for helping with securing the facility. And the restaurants that will be there are Pizza Lab, Baja, Il Talivo?
Pavolo.
There we go. From the Italian. La Boheme, Olivia's, and Court Street. So please come. It's going to be a lot of fun, and you will get to learn all about ranked choice voting. It's one per board. Come and support your restaurant. Well, don't come if you're not supporting Court Street.
La Boheme was gerrymandered into my ward, so.
It really is a 6-ward restaurant.
As I said, it was gerrymandered into my ward.
So I got two restaurants.
Councilman Cohen?
Thank you, Council President. I serve as the council's representative on the Hoboken Business Alliance Board. For folks who don't know, the Hoboken Business Alliance's mission is to promote and improve Hoboken's business environment. The HBA provides additional sanitation, beautification, and marketing services and hosts public events like the Christmas tree lighting at 11th and Washington that was enjoyed by hundreds of people last December. HBA sent out a postcard with a little bug on it. I think that's what it's called, a bug, that you can scan and go right to a survey. The survey, we're encouraging folks to answer it to get your feedback as to what programs and services you'd like to see residents, business owners, and visitors of Hoboken get from the Business Alliance. You can take the survey, share your views on what you would like to see the Business Alliance do to enhance and promote our business community. If you'd like a link to it, you can also email me at hobokenphil@gmail.com and I'll send you a link. So we're encouraging as many people as possible to participate to get the most broad-based feedback as to the mission and the direction of the Business Alliance. And Roxanne Early, the executive director, was happy that I made this announcement. So to her, I want to say that. I want to thank and acknowledge Director Sharp and his team. I got an email 2 weeks ago about the intersection of 10th and Garden. There were delivery trucks parking illegally right up to the crosswalks on both sides of the streets. Cars that were driving south on Garden Street, when they approached 10th Street, there's no stop sign at 10th Street. They had absolutely no way of seeing what was coming on the intersection. It was dangerous for cars. It was dangerous for pedestrians. This constituent asked me whether it was possible to daylight the intersection. I sent the email to Director Sharp on a Friday afternoon. On Monday afternoon, after the weekend, they were installed on all 4 corners, and the intersection looks great. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback from the neighborhood, so I want to thank Director Sharp and his team for being so prompt on that. The council, in our last meeting, approved the purchase of 500 of these flexible bollards. Some people have criticized them for being likely to fall or get knocked over by trucks. These are actually thicker and can actually stand up to trucks. So I think that people will find that they work better. The 500 bollards that the council approved at the last meeting will, at 4 per intersection, 200 I believe it's 200 intersections or 50 intersections. 50 intersections can be protected. Anyway, those bollards will be coming in the next few weeks, and they're all supposed to be deployed later this year. If there's an intersection that you're concerned about, you can feel free to email me or Director Sharp, and the city's really been responsive. This is a low cost, relatively, compared to building bump outs, it's a great strategy in terms of improving sightlines and intersections, and just wanted to recognize the Department of Transportation for their work on this. Thank you, Council President.
Council Vice President.
Thank you, Council President. A couple things. First and foremost, the Finance and Infrastructure Subcommittee met again. We are on a timeline for March 1st as the introduction of our budget. We're trying to comply fully with the state requirements to make sure that we get that to this council. We have our hearings, our workshops, and then finalize that vote, all within the statutory requirements, although there was an extension mandated by the state, so we should be within those limits. So I'm hopeful that we'll have that to this council in our first meeting in March. And I just want to build a little bit on what Councilman Quintero was talking about, supporting our public safety. That comes in all forms, right? Right now, we have our fire superiors are working in their first year without a contract. Our firefighters are now in their last year of their contract. And there's other municipal entities, the police superiors, the police department, the rank and file officers, the municipal workers, the part-time workers. I think it's something that we all need to kind of consider on a larger scale to make sure that we're following some type of schedule so we don't find ourselves in the situation that we did just last year where we were finalizing some of these contracts
4 years down.
few years, out of their contract. So I want to make sure that we're doing that both at the subcommittee level and at the level of the entire council as soon as we can. So again, I'll ask publicly, as I have privately, to the business administrator, please make sure that the unions are being brought to the table and those discussions are being had. I really want to make sure that we as a council provide you as the administration everything that we need to, and we're ready to vote on it as soon as you could come to terms with those unions. So I think that's really important. And then just one of the other things that, on the same kind of vein here with public safety, there's a problem in this country with how we kind of treat each other. It's politics is becoming so divisive. When I first started, it was okay to disagree with each other. Doesn't mean that you hated each other. It doesn't mean that you sniped at each other. It doesn't mean that you insulted each other in a public meeting. But there are certain council members, there are certain mayors, there are certain statewide officials and federal officials. They all need a boogeyman all the time because it justifies their actions. Instead of working, instead of doing the things that we need to do to make our city or our state or our country a better place to live for its residents. Those are the things that we should be doing all the time. The sniping and the comments, I know it's going to happen, but the more we keep it to a minimum, the more we accomplish as a body, the more we accomplish as a city, a county, a state, and the U.S. government. That's how we get to that point. It's got to start at the very most local level. If we can't do it, the county's never going to do it. And then the state's never going to do it. And then the federal government's never going to do it. So it's just something that, as I said, everybody needs a boogeyman to justify their own existence, and that'll continue, I'm sure, but I think we need to keep it to a minimum. That's all I have, Council President.
Thank you. I just have a few quick upcoming events that I think are noteworthy. Tomorrow night, in addition to the Rank the Restaurant event about ranked choice voting, there's also a Hall of Fame ceremony happening at the Hoboken Housing Authority at 221 Jackson Street with three, I would say, community leaders at 6 o'clock to talk about their journeys. On Monday, the Volunteer Ambulance Corps will be holding a fundraiser at 10th and Willow. And it's their 50th anniversary, so I encourage you to go out and support them. Next Friday is the next community blood drive. It is happening, that's Friday, February 24th at the Multi-Service Center in the gym. And then finally, Hoboken High School is having a Black History celebration on Tuesday, February 28th at 6 p.m. in their auditorium. I just wanted to add, since Councilman Quintero had brought it up, on the topic of mass shootings, I wanted to specifically thank our school resource officers who've actually been making an effort over the last several months. We've been organizing meetings, typically through each school's PTO organization, to meet with parents and have conversations about what's required of each school community on a regular basis in terms of not just active shooter drills, but also fire drills, just to give parents some level of insight into what's required, why it's required, how to talk about those things with your kids. I think, that's something we all worry about is obviously that, when is that headline going to involve one of our communities? And so I'm really grateful. In particular, Officer Anthony Feskin has been really phenomenal working with parents. We've held them at schools, a number of schools, and are continuing to reach out to get those scheduled because the work of our school resource officers, I think, is very special. They are, full law enforcement officers, but their role is to take a community policing standpoint in terms of working in communities like our schools so that children are comfortable seeing them and they know that they, can reach out to them, that they're members of that community. And I think that's a really wonderful thing for what that says about Hoboken. So with that, motion to close.